pile behind me keeps growing. It's just gonna keep growing and growing forever until I finally. Why sound like that? Yeah, the pile behind me is just gonna keep growing forever, guys, until I finally move. So it is what it is, and I'm gonna keep my paintings and stuff up for as long as I can, because seeing that wall be vacant and empty is gonna make me rather sad. But I have gotten a lot of stuff packed today. And now I'm chilling. But I wanted to share some stuff because I have some ideas planned for videos that I kind of wanted to soft launch on live because it's easier that way. And I have to figure out, like, one of my hardest things online that I find is like doing short form content, which is what most people watch at this point because attention spans have deteriorated so much. So I need to find ways to short form and condense the stories that I want to share because I have some pretty damn good story times that I could be sharing. And I just haven't, and I've kind of sat on them for years, and now I want to share them because I think that they will be good stories for people who are either going through similar things or have gone through similar things. And they are funny in a way. Like, it is also very embarrassing because, like, some of these stories are like dating related stories. Like, I wanted to do some story times about like literally the worst people that I've ever dated, which has been like a secret that I've kind of been carrying with me because it's just like so deeply embarrassing that I allowed myself to be treated a certain way. So those are the main story times that I want to share because I have some good ones. And like, after seeing some of the stuff, like, I don't know if anyone's seen some of the posts about like alpine divorce, which is where like people's boyfriends have gone hiking with them and just literally fucking left them there. And I had like the urban version of that happen to me with one of my exes, and like my dumbass still forgave him and stayed with him after. And like, that's far from the only thing that he did. So I want to do that as a story times. It's been a few years now, and it would be difficult for people to link it back to which person did that. And ideally, hopefully, they aren't still creeping my content and stuff. And I'm moving away, so honestly, I don't really give a fuck anymore. Because like, I'm so much more detached from it. But I want to do that. And yes, never hike on the first date. But the alpine divorce stuff is like people with their established boyfriends, which is the craziest part. And like, that is so much worse than what happened to me in the sense that like I still had service and stuff and I could call for help. But like, when you're out of service and you're in the middle of fucking nowhere, especially if they lead you off trail or something first, like, that literally is attempted murder and it's very scary. Also, you can see, wait, this is mirrored, so I always get it wrong. You can see my dad in the background. See that right there? That's my dad. So hi, Dad. Everyone say hi, it's Shelby's dad. That's him. I need to get him a better urn, and I've been debating what I want to do because my dad was very much a prankster, and like, I had the idea, like, this would be harder to pull off, but it would be really funny, and I think that he'd think it's funny. I had the idea of getting like a remote control car, like, because he used to drive a BMW when he was able to drive. So getting him like a BMW and somehow fashioning it as the urn, and then I could just drive him around places. Um, but the only concern is something like that, it wouldn't obviously be an urn, so I wouldn't want people or like children to play with it. So I don't know. I need to figure something out because I don't want to just leave him in that thing. But he's going to be staying in that thing at least until I move and figure out something else out. But anyways, that's beside the point. So I have these story times that I wanted to get into and start doing videos on, and I need to figure out a way to like on it, like, one of them's gonna have to be in parts because this dude did so many fucking things. And the reason I want to share them is because like, I've been a generally outspoken person in a lot of ways for quite a few years, like, especially with how people would know me online. And I can assert myself in certain things, like when it comes to horse welfare, but previously in relationships, I could not do that. So I think there's like this belief system that like strong types of women would stand up and wouldn't allow themselves to be treated a certain way, when that's not always true because it's a different context. And like, relationships are so weird, especially when someone lies to you in the beginning and shows you a different version of themselves, and you meet and fall in love with this person who's sweet and caring and seems emotionally intelligent and is doing all of these things that make you feel good about yourself. And then you are looking at that person that you've met and you are assuming that that is just who they are, when really it is just them on their absolute best behavior when they are trying to win you over. And then once they have you, these types of people will do a complete 180 and change. And then the problem is that since you've seen this other side of them from the beginning, you want to believe that that is the real version of themselves, and that there are these different factors at play that are making them behave differently at a certain point. And you want to just keep clinging to those good feelings. And then even like in the midst of the bad things, they'll do certain things that are nice. And when you're being treated like shit most of the time, it feels really good to have someone do something nice for you. And then it's like intoxicating, and then you develop these trauma bonds and you stay way too long. So my unfortunate legacy is that for years, and honestly this has been more of a pattern than not for me, where I've like repeatedly forgiven people um and stayed in situations where I shouldn't have. And I have believed that original version of someone when I shouldn't have. And I have clung to that belief and done so for like months, years at a time. Like this person that I'm going to do this for the first story time I dated for 2 years, which is super, super fucking embarrassing, because there's truly so many times where I should have been like, that is enough. I shouldn't do this anymore. Like one example that I'll give, which I might not put in the video because it's going to take too long to explain. But I'm moving to the Rocky Mountains, right? And over the course of years, I've driven up that way a lot to go visit my best friend. So years ago, which would have been like 4 years ago now, probably 5 years ago actually, I was going to visit my best friend, and I was planning on road tripping to this area that I have driven to many times before. And it's about a 9-hour drive. So it's not a short drive. It's not an easy drive. You're going through multiple mountain passes, but in the summertime, it is pretty reliable. So that was what my plan was. And I was like, I'm going on a road trip. And then my at the time boyfriend's like, I don't like road trips, hurts my back, like I'm tall, I don't like being in the car, blah 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 blah. And I was like, okay, cool, don't come then, I'm still going. And then he's like, well, I don't want you to go alone either, like that's dangerous. And I was like, I don't care what you feel like. I'm a grown woman and I've done this drive alone before. I'm going. You can either come with me or you can stay home. And then he made the choice to come with me. And he, like, I gave him my itinerary and was like, I'm staying from this date to this date. I'm staying at my friend Amy's place. And this is what the plan is. And he's like, yeah, that's fine. And he had like a an event that he was supposed to go to on a Saturday, which I was planning on coming back on the Sunday. And I was like, well, if you're going to go to that event, that's not going to work because I'm not going to be back in time. And he's like, oh, no, I'm not going. I already got them a gift. They know I'm not coming. And I was like, okay, great. And then we get there and we're there for a couple of days. And then like on the third day, he's like, actually, like, I really need to go to this event. It's my friend's engagement party and it's very important and I can't miss it. And I was like, well, we talked about this and you said you weren't going, and now we've taken my car and you don't really have a way back unless I leave early. And I was like, I don't really want to leave early. I was planning on staying longer. Then he just keeps whining and complaining. And then I end up driving back early when I did not want to, because he's like, I need to go to this engagement party. I absolutely can't miss it. And we've been camping, so my truck is full of camping shit. We get back after a 9-hour drive. 9 hours. We're at my farm place. And he's like, I need to go home and shower to get ready for this engagement party. And I was supposed to be going with him as his date. So we left like all of the coolers, all of the camping stuff in my truck. Important for later. And then after, when we're supposed to be there and he's supposed to be picking up and it's about half an hour to the event, I get a text that's like, I dropped by and I said hi to her and I gave her my gift, and my friends are all going to the cabin. The boys are all going to the cabin. So now I'm going to the cabin with the boys. And I was like, fucking pardon? I'm sorry, what? I just drove back 9 hours to get you back in time. And you're looking at me and you're telling me that you are going to the cabin with the boys. He's like, oh yeah, it was like a last minute plan and it's no big deal. She doesn't care that I'm missing her engagement party. I already saw her and we hung out for a bit and it's fine. And I was like, I was in the middle of getting ready to go to this engagement party with you as your date. And I also could be fucking back hanging out with my best friend instead of being here for the weekend while you fucking lied to me and ditched me. And then he denied the fact that he like, because I know for a fact that it's like the whole motivation to drive back was because of the cabin. Like, I'm not fucking stupid, but he lied. He's like, no, this was last minute. I actually was planning on going to the engagement party. And I was like, fucking bullshit. You rushed me back from visiting my friend that I only see once a year. And now you have fucking taken off to go to your friend's cabin that you go to multiple times a year, mind you. And it's only about an hour and a half away, so it's not a difficult place to get to comparatively. And anyways, like, I was fucking pissed. So I was like doing the whole thing where you're like texting and writing fucking paragraphs, and was like, what the fuck? Like, this is so inconsiderate. You completely ruined my trip for no reason. You lied to me. This is selfish. And also, you are now ditching your friend's engagement party just to go to the cabin with some of your friends that you live with and see all the time. And then he's like, you're being crazy. Like, I don't want you to ruin my weekend. And then he fucking ghosted me and stonewalled me for the entire fucking weekend and did not reply to me until he was back. And my fucking dumbass bitch self still forgave this man. And that is far from the worst thing that he did, because he went on to repeatedly do a lot of things that were not okay. And obviously, like, I'm not a psychiatrist, I can't diagnose people, but it was very selfish and narcissistic type traits that we were seeing, where it was all about me, my feelings take priority. And if you say or do something to hold me accountable that makes me feel insecure, my feelings changing to be frustrated or upset are now your fault. So I had to be on the hook for my own feelings as well as his, and basically walking on eggshells all the time. And like throughout the course of the relationship, there was like little things like, one example I have is like, he was just fucking being super weird one morning and like wasn't talking to me and was like smashing dishes around and being super passive aggressive. And I was like, are you mad at me about something? He's like, no, I'm not, it's fine. And then he still kept doing it all day. And I was like, okay, like, dude, what the fuck? Like, if you're gonna act differently around me when you're clearly mad, like, you owe it to me to communicate that instead of just being fucking weird. And then he's like, yeah, I'm mad about something from like 2 days ago. And it's like, okay, you're a fucking child. But the worst one is like when he ditched me in the middle of the night after a party, after yelling at me in front of the entire party, where there was also parents and all of his friends. And the biggest red flag in all of that is, while he was yelling at me, none of his friends stepped in to do anything, and the parents basically didn't either. They just all watched this man yell at me and get like up in my face. And the reason why he was mad at me and yelling at me is because I was like, every time we go to a party, you ditch me for your friends and you don't talk to me, and I don't know everyone very well, and like, I don't really feel like I fit in, and you know I have social anxiety, and you make no effort to make me feel included. And then that made him mad, so he yelled at me in front of everyone. And then walking home, he proceeded to still be mad, so he was like yelling at me on the walk home. And then was like walking way far ahead of me, and I would like was pissed off, so I like got frustrated, and I sat down on like a bus bench, and I was like, okay, if you're gonna like walk ahead, like, I guess I'm just gonna sit here, and if I get assaulted, like, yes, that's gonna happen if you're gonna leave me alone in the middle of the fucking night at 2 a.m. Which is like, yes, that's petty, 100%. But he was being a fucking dickhead, so I wanted to say that. And then he freaked out. He's just like, how dare you fucking say that? And then just like left me, like did exactly what I was like saying, like, oh, if you do this, you're kind of a piece of shit. Did that. I ended up taking an Uber back to his place, so he didn't know that I was there. And I stayed in his room, and he proceeded to party on the bottom floor with all of his friends the rest of the night when he got back, and never checked to see if I got home safe, never texted me. And at this time, I was like living with my mom, but my mom was away in Florida, and he was the only person who knew where I was. So if anything had happened, no one would know, and he did not check the next day or anything, and did not fucking care. And stuff like that is like, honestly not that uncommon in heterosexual relationships where men do this to women. And it's insane to me because it's like, even if I like objectively hated a woman, and like, I don't hate anyone, but if I could have someone that I really don't get along with and I really don't like, and I would still care about them getting home safe. Like, there is no person in which, like, especially like with women, where I would be like, I'm gonna leave you alone in the middle of the night, and not check in with you. Like, that is an insane thing to do. I wouldn't do that to my worst enemy. And like, this is someone that was supposed to love me that did this to me. And it's not something that is uncommon, because I've talked to a lot of other women who have had similar situations. But anyways, for the better part of 2 years, I let this dude fucking ruin my life. and do things where he was just periodically being such a piece of shit, but on a regular basis being just generally inconsiderate and shitty. And finally, the last straw for me was when we went to my friend's engagement party. And this is where like we're gonna kind of circle back to like his friend's engagement party and like how important an engagement party is, right? So the engagement party was planned well in advance. He knew he was coming as my date. We RSVP'd like over a month in advance. And this is like one of my best friends that I've been friends with since grade 1. So we've known each other for like 2 decades. Not that that necessarily is relevant because an engagement party is an engagement party. He comes as my date, and then like I guess on the same day, like the day before, so his friend decided that he's gonna have his birthday party the same day. But key point, the birthday party is at nighttime. The engagement party is like around 3, and it's like from 3 until like 7 or 8 or so. And like I was like, okay, like our plan was just like you can still go and hang out with your friends. We're gonna stay here until 9, and then you can go be with your friends. And he's like, okay, great. We get there, he doesn't want to talk to anyone. He's like fucking sitting on a couch being the most antisocial dickhead. And it's like so fucking embarrassing. Like so embarrassing. And I still to this day feel bad about this situation because it's so embarrassing. He's just being such a fucking dick and not talking to anyone. He's being short with people when I introduce him to people because he doesn't want to be there. He's on his phone the whole time, texting his friend. And then we've been there for about an hour and a half. And then he's like, can we go? Can we go? Can I go and like go hang out with my friends? And I was like, we've been here for a fucking hour and a half. What do you mean? I was like, this is insane. I was like, this is my best friend of 2 decades. It's her engagement party. You only, like, generally speaking, a lot of people like plan to only get engaged once. This is the only time. I was like, your friend's gonna have a lot of birthdays and you're still gonna see him tonight. What's the big deal? And he's being such a dick. And then we get into a fight at the party and we're arguing and he fucking ruins that part of the party for me. And then like I leave him alone and doing my thing, hanging out with my friends, and he's still being a fucking dick. And he's like, I want to leave, and it's like we've been there for 2 hours at this point, and he's just being a fucking asshole. So then like I'm pissed because I'm like, you were the one that made a big stink months ago about needing to go to an engagement party and how important that is. And yes, you still ditched it, but like you clearly had the awareness to use that as leverage. And now you're here with me at my best friend's engagement party, who I'm much closer with than the person whose party you ditched, and you're trying to rush me out the door to go be early for your friend's birthday just so you can drink and get drunk. Bullshit. So then eventually, like, I stay for a bit, and he's pissing me off so much, and it's just like ruining my night. So we do end up leaving because we biked there. So we bike back. When we get back to his place, I break up with him and I'm like, you're a fucking piece of shit. You ruined my night. You made my friend's engagement party about yourself and you embarrassed the fuck out of me in front of a crowd of people that I've known for a very long time. And then I was just like, you need help. And I kind of popped off and was like, you're selfish, you're emotionally abusive. And I did do a low blow that I do not regret because it was true, because I know that like his parents had a very unhealthy relationship, as did mine. So they modeled an unhealthy relationship where they're yelling and not communicating properly and where there's emotional abuse. And he told me that. So I was like, you told me that you didn't want to repeat your parents' history. And I was like, well, congratulations with your behavior, you're going to. I hope that you go to therapy and heal because this is going to be your life. And you're going to blame the woman. You're going to blame whoever your partner is. You're going to make jokes about them being the old ball and chain. You're going to be misogynistic and act like it is such a hardship for you to have made the choice to get married to someone. But I was like, it'll all be your fault. It'll be a self-fulfilling prophecy just because you're being shitty to your partner. You don't properly communicate. You're not emotionally intelligent and you suck. And then he fucking got so mad that he threw a beer, like an unopened beer can, so hard at a tree that it exploded. And like he wasn't throwing it at me, like it wasn't close enough to like actually be at risk of hitting me, but he threw it in my direction. And then I just looked up at him and I was like, "You're fucked." I was like, "You're so fucked." And I got in my Uber and I left, and that was that. And that was one of the worst people that I've ever dated. I hope that he has gone to therapy. Otherwise, he's going to be shrapnel in the life of women. And I honestly don't think he's the type of person to go to therapy. I wish the best for him, honestly. Like, I hope he heals. Otherwise, he's going to keep ruining other people's lives. but literally the worst fucking person. And then also like the problem that I noticed, and this is where when we're talking about abusive relationships, like all of his friends were complicit in his behavior because they would frequently hear this man yelling at me in their house. And none of them, other than one of his friends was like, "You're being an asshole." He did that once. Actually, sorry, two, because one of the friends of his I'm still friends with. Um, and he was there and we were having a conversation, and like my ex was being a dick because I was talking about my business and like how like I was building it at that point, and I was kind of going on a tear about billionaires, as I do, because like they're fucking selfish. Fuck Elon Musk. I think he sucks. He's a dick. And he's like, well, you'd want to be a billionaire if you could. And I was like, no, I wouldn't actually. And I was like, I actively lose money in my business just to be more size inclusive. I would make more money if I had a smaller size range, but I would be less inclusive. So it's like that's just one of many examples where I am taking a financial hit to my bottom line because I want to do the right thing. So it's like there's no world in which I would become a billionaire. Um, and clearly he wanted to be one. So he was trying to defend it because he felt insecure about the fact that I have morals and he doesn't. And he was doing that in front of his friend, and then his friend was kind of checking him on it and was like, oh no, like that sounds great. I'm glad that you have integrity. And I was like, thank you. But other than that, like all of his friends would hear him yell at me on a regular basis. They would see how he was treating me, and like they didn't check or do anything with his behavior. And he was kind of like the ringleader of his friend group. And ironically, like before, like after him, I was like, I'm never going to date hockey guys ever again. And this isn't a hate on for hockey guys. It is the dynamic of basically any male dominated sport where unless the leader of the team, like we're the captain, they have integrity and they have emotional intelligence and they set a high standard for how they expect their friends to treat women, it oftentimes is like sifting through a fucking a swamp of like shitty men because they normalize such depraved, fucked up behavior and discussions of women as like locker room talk. So for me, like that's now one of my at least yellow flags. Like I honestly, generally speaking, like if I was on a dating app right now and I saw that a guy was like really into hockey, it would be a pretty big red flag for me unless there was other stuff on the profile to counteract that type of mindset. So like the hockey thing's one. Golfing is another one of my red flags. Again, I don't hate people who golf, but there's a certain attitude that comes with it. And it's the same reason where it's like I don't really want to date men that are horse people because there's a huge risk factor involved where a very high likelihood of having perspectives that deeply conflict with what I believe in. And I don't want to spend my time arguing with some dude about my profession and passion when we are not in alignment. So there's little things like that where they're red flags. Another one is like guys that are super into like UFC fighting, and like for me, in terms of watching sports, I do find fighting to be one of the more interesting sports to watch because it's very skill based and they are pretty well rounded athletes, and I can respect that. However, I would say that it is a very right wing hobby to be in, and that came out in his behavior. And these are things that I now know in hindsight, but at the time that I didn't, because I was very much about like giving people the benefit of the doubt, wanting to believe in the best of them and not typecasting and stereotyping people. But it led me to being forgiving to a fault and not noticing earlier red flags because I was like, oh, well, what if I'm being judgmental? And there's other instances where I've done the same thing with like even like work related stuff. Like there was a trainer I worked for years ago that I ended up walking out on the job with because he started having really openly racist perspectives, and there was red flags before that where he would say certain things or believe in certain conspiracy theories that were concerning, and that kind of just rubbed me the wrong way, and like I just never felt fully comfortable around him. I always felt on edge, which was like my body telling me, hey, like this guy's a dangerous person. And even when he first reached out to me to work, what are we doing? Are you hitting children? You're hitting a child. Even when he first reached out to work with me, I initially kind of my first response was to be like, I am not super comfortable working with a male trainer. And then I was like, I need to open my mind and not be sexist. So then I did, and I worked for him for a couple of years. But this was back in 2020. So during COVID and like the George Floyd protests is when stuff really kind of hit this wall where I was like, holy shit. And like on all of my platforms, I was super vocal about the George Floyd protests and talking about police brutality and talking about how I felt about it and like the anti-blackness and how Black people are disproportionately killed by police, blah, blah, blah. Very vocal about it. This man knew that I'm biracial. He knew that my dad was Black. And all of that jazz. So I get to work and he goes out of his way to bring up this topic of police brutality. And like he already knows how I feel because he follows me on social media. He sees all my posts. It's not a secret. And at first, the conversation started off innocently enough, and I was just answering his questions and saying how I felt, and it was fine. But then it got to a point where he started saying like, "Oh well, like there's no evidence that Black people are harmed more by the cops," and I was like, "That is completely incorrect. I can pull you up a bunch of statistics that say otherwise." And then he was like, "Well, my son has been pulled over by the police and has had the police be mean to him." And I was like, "Well, is your son still alive?" And he's like, "Yep." And I was like, "Well, there you go." So I was like, "Yeah, the police can sometimes give people trouble, but there's a big difference between be like over exerting force in certain ways. Like, for example, cops in Canada will illegally search you all the time if you don't assert that as a right. Like, they will just ask, like, especially in high school with high school age kids, they will search your bags and you have to give them permission. They need a warrant to search your shit without permission. So if a cop ever asks to search your stuff, unless you're like entering a concert or something where that is implicit consent, because in order to get into the venue, you need to let them search you. If they're pulling you over on the side of the road and they do not have a warrant or a reason to need to search you, you can say no. Anyways, I digress. So he goes on and then he gets to this point where he's just like keeps repeating, he's like, "White people have a reason to be afraid of Black people, don't you agree?" And I was like, "No, I don't, not unless they're racist." And he kept repeating the same question like at least 5 times, and I kept responding with the exact same response. So it was like a broken record, and I was like, "Not unless they're racist, not unless they're racist." And I'm on his horse, mind you. At this point I'm riding, and this man is actively trying to antagonize me into a discussion that he started as my employer. So that's also very unprofessional. And then he goes quiet. He sits down on the mountain block, and I'm like, "Thank fucking God, we're finally done here. I can't wait for this conversation to be over and to get the fuck out of here." No, he's not done. He sits down for like maybe 5 minutes, and then he just suddenly bursts up from the mounting block and starts like running towards me on his horse. And his horse is like, "What the fuck?" And he's like waving his hands and he's yelling and he's like, "You called me an uneducated racist." And I was like, "I didn't, but like if the shoe fits, man, like fucking wear that bitch like Cinderella. I didn't say that, but if you feel like one, you probably are." Especially based off of those comments. And he's like, "Get the fuck off my horse." And I'm like, "No problem." I get off his horse, hand his horse the reins. I walk out of the barn and I go sit in the car. And mind you, like at this point, my at the time friend was working with me. So she witnessed all of this and didn't say anything, which bit of a red flag looking back. I just attributed it to the fact that it's like we're both anxious, whatever. But she didn't say anything. So I'm waiting in the car for her to come. I block him on everything, never talk to him again, never return to the work. He's like expecting me to because he's texting her and being like, "I don't know if I'm going to let Shelby come back," because he just assumes that I'd be like, "Oh, I'm dying to come back." No, I was like, fuck you and your racist ass life. Um, I loved some of his horses. That was disappointing, but it's like, yeah, fuck that. But that was another time where like my intuition was like on it, where I was like, "I'm not comfortable around this person," and then I stayed. And there's been a few other times with that where I've done the same thing and I've wanted to give people the benefit of the doubt, or there's just been certain things that I've been naive about where people will have certain belief systems. And if it's something that I'm not super educated on, I don't necessarily draw the map to figure out where those perspectives often lead. So now I've gotten to do a lot of learning where I've figured some pretty common traits that I noticed, and like even just phrases and belief systems and ways of being that are red flags. And again, like on their own, if that's like the only thing, it might be more like a yellow flag. But there's certain things that like men will say, do, believe in, and support, and like even people that they like. Like another non-negotiable for me is like if a guy is a fan of Joe Rogan, hard pass, hard pass. No, thank you. Will not date them. If they can be the devil's advocate for Donald Trump, hard pass. Absolutely not. If you can try to, if you're going out of your way to find good traits in that man at this time, especially with all the shit that's already happened, No, thank you. I'm not into that. And there's like a lot of other things like same thing with like anyone who's like willing to platform someone like Andrew Tate in any capacity where they're like playing devil's advocate in any capacity for that. No. Hard pass. No, thank you. Not gonna do that. And it's been useful now because it's like you can kind of pick through the haystack a little bit more to try to find that needle. And I've been doing better at kind of noticing red flags, but there's been a few times where like I've made some pretty bad miscalculations, and like that's just one of the relationship one that I shared earlier. That's just one of them. There's one that I'm honestly even more embarrassed about, and like arguably one of the craziest people I have ever dated. Much shorter duration than the one that I talked about, thank goodness, because I ran. But one of the most unhinged people that I have ever dated. And um same type of thing where again like these types of relationships start off with love bombing where they're like going out of their way to make everything butterflies and rainbows, and they're acting super into you really quickly, and they're pulling out all the stops, and it just seems like too good to be true, and that's because it fucking is. It is. It's too good to be true when they do shit like that. And then like my window where it's like if someone is heavily faking who they are, usually within 3 months you start to see the cracks. So they start to show you aspects of who they are where there's going to just be things where they do things that feel like a little bit off and incongruent with the person they've shown you that they are. And usually that'll happen within the first 3 months. So I kind of have like a 3 month probationary period now where it's like someone needs to be consistent for 3 months. And if they're not, then I'm going to like take it at face value and go, okay, like this is clearly who you are. And that's okay. But it has been useful. So I guess like in sharing this, the hope is to kind of help other women feel validated, because I think that there's a certain degree of normalization of like shitty behavior from men and going like that's just the way they are. And it's not like that. And it's embarrassing to look back on when you have like the hindsight of knowing like where things went. But like I think that a more positive way of looking at it is probably looking at it through the lens of like you wanted to see the best in someone and you chose to see the best even when they were showing you the worst. And that goes to show like your capacity to offer someone love. So then imagine that capacity when you find someone who is actually ready to receive it and project it back into you in their own way. And then that's a very beautiful thing to think about, because if you can love people who are objectively shitty people with your heart and see the good in them when there is not very much of it, imagine how wonderful that will be when someone is more aligned with what you want. So that's kind of my nice way of looking at it. And sorry for the chat. I hope you don't mind that I put down in words, hey, you seem interesting and clearly a very attractive woman. Thank you. I don't feel very attractive right now because I've been fucking cleaning all day and packing shit. And then someone said, I have a lot of examples of red flags I ignored as well and gave chances. Quite literally 99% of the time got bitten in the ass. Now everyone says I'm mean. LOL, I just refuse to be taken advantage of. Well, and that's the other thing too, is like when women start having standards and setting boundaries earlier and like being like, I don't want to be with someone like this. They're labeled as difficult. They're labeled as mean. They're labeled as too picky. They're told that they're going to be alone forever. And they're basically shamed into lowering their standards, which I think plays a role where, I saw a post earlier today where someone was talking about the fact that women are conditioned to be in abusive relationships with men. But then when they stay in them, they're blamed for the fact that they stayed, even though we are conditioned to be treated a certain way and normalize it. And it's true. And like even if we look at like the average relationships that we have like normalized to us throughout society, like they're not very healthy. Like it's really normalized to have like these really big explosive ends to relationships, which obviously if the relationship is toxic that makes sense, but this idea where it's like super taboo to be on good terms with an ex, I think goes to show how normalized it is to have unhealthy relationships. Because in a healthy relationship, even if there's hurt on one or both sides, you should still be able to have respect for one another and treat each other with kindness and compassion, even if one person needs distance. Because I think that can be the part where it's like one person might be like, I literally can't cope with being around you right now. But like they don't need to be mean to you. So this whole thing where it's like you have to hate someone after you end a relationship, I think stems from the normalization of really unhealthy relationships. Because in theory, a healthy relationship should be able to come to a close, even if one person doesn't want it to. Without it being this big explosive thing. And oftentimes that's not what's normalized. And it's not necessarily both people that are at fault, because if one person is super toxic and they nuke the relationship, or like they get broken up with and then they act crazy, then like, yeah, that's going to make it difficult for the other side, no matter how nice they are, to not have things be unhealthy. But I think the goal should be to pick people that are healthy enough people that when, even if it's not going to work out, that you can kind of talk these things through. And that's something that I have done as of recently that I'm proud of. Like my most recent relationships, like all these shitty people I'm talking about with the horrible abusive things that they did, not my recent ex. I don't want anyone to attribute that to him. But like that's something that I am proud of, because it's a sign of good communication and actually being able to respect one another as individual human beings and maintain that respect through like a difficult transition. And like there's been like 2 total relationships that I've had that have had healthy ends like that, where and like in both of them there's been more respect throughout the relationship, so that's part of it, and the rest have been pretty fucking toxic. And there is the component of where I shouldn't have let myself be treated a certain way. I should have set more boundaries. I should have noticed earlier red flags. And definitely like the way I reacted to people sometimes wasn't always fair. And like I wasn't the healthiest version of myself in those relationships. When you're in a toxic relationship, it's like impossible to not fucking be crazy. Like it's so embarrassing to think back of like if I go through my notes on my phone, I have notes that I wrote when I was trying to like plead with my ex-partner to fucking see the humanity in me and understand how much he hurt me. And I have like these paragraphs of me just like pouring my heart out and like thinking in my head, like, if I just say this a certain way, he'll understand how much he's hurt me and like he'll apologize and it'll all be fine. Like he just doesn't understand. And like pages and pages of notes like that. And it never fucking mattered, because at the end of the day, like people like that aren't looking to understand other people. They are so caught up in their own feelings and how they react to things that being held accountable feels like an attack. And so basically the only way you can keep relationships like that seeming somewhat healthy and stable is if you never tread anywhere close to making that person uncomfortable, even if they're being cruel to you, even if they're being unfair, even if they're mistreating you. Because as soon as you start to hold them accountable, it becomes a problem, and then you have these big blow up fights. But the fights happen because of their reaction, and then they blame their reaction on you, and they're like, oh well, like this always happens, we always have these long battles. And it's like, this doesn't have to be this way. It's only like this because of how you're responding to being held accountable for your behavior. And the fact that you're yelling, you're accusing. Another common thing I see in situations like this is like, let's think of an example where it's like, okay, it hurt my feelings when you did XYZ. You bring this up to your partner, and what they did happened, let's say that day or the day before, it's recent. And then they go, oh, well, you did blah, 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 months ago. And they deflect to something that didn't matter enough to them to bring up at all in most cases, or that you've already resolved. And it's an immediate deflection to put the blame back on you. And that is super common. And it's something that you see these types doing. So that's another red flag, again, where even if it doesn't feel that bad, if someone is consistently doing that, that is a sign of an emotionally immature person. And it is something that I think is like normal, especially if you've been in situations where it has not been safe to have communication, and where it hasn't been safe to share your feelings. Because even like in family dynamics, that's something that's happened. Like with my family, like I had very unhealthy communication styles normalized to me. And like my dad, like to like, and like, again, this is something I want to talk about at some point in a video, but like I just don't know how to do it in the nuanced way. in short form content or even in a long form video. But like my dad, there's a lot of amazing, great things about him, but he was emotionally abusive to my mom. Their relationship was super unhealthy. There was screaming and yelling all the time. And like, this is what I grew up listening to as a child. And then like he had the stroke and my mom became his primary caretaker after years of being emotionally abused and made to feel shitty about herself, about him. And there's a lot of traits that I see in my mom today that are still the byproduct of being emotionally abused for that long in a marriage by someone that she loved. Like she has very low self-esteem. She's a people pleaser. She's a pushover, and she doesn't set boundaries very well. And for me, it's frustrating. And sometimes to the point where it's like my mom and I will get in pissing matches because it is really hard for me to see how she lets people treat her sometimes. And then I get triggered by it because I, one, think about how I watched her be treated by my dad, and two, think about how I've been treated by men before, and it's very triggering to me. So then I get frustrated, and I'm like, you need to not do that anymore. And like, I want to control her behavior because I'm like, you shouldn't do this. If you set boundaries, it'll be better in the long run. Like, stop coddling and placating people. But even with that, like that's an aspect of myself that I still need to work on healing because I can't control other people's decisions. I can't make people do what I think they should do, even if I think it's going to be healthier for them in the long run. Like people have to make their own decisions, but it's really hard for me. And anyways, with my family and that being the dynamic, like the communication wasn't healthy. Like there was a lot of yelling, a lot of back and forth, a lot of where like there wouldn't ever actually be a resolution to anything, and there would also be a lack of apologizing. So it's like rather than apologizing and actually resolving the issue and moving on, it's like you just sweep it under the rug and you pretend it didn't happen, or you do like something that's unrelated but kind of nice for the person to kind of be like a more vague sorry without actually taking accountability. And like that's the way that things were. And then I've been working a lot on myself, and it's like pretty difficult to exist in that type of family dynamic. And also like my whole family has been working on themselves, so it is a lot better than it was, but there is still challenges with not knowing, like people not apologizing when they should, with deflecting to previous things and being like, oh well, you do XYZ, and it's like that's entirely unrelated to the topic at hand right now. You're bringing up something from months, weeks, or whatever ago, and if it was something that bothered you, that's great, and we can talk about that, but you shouldn't be using it to derail this issue that I'm bringing up with you. And anyways, it's something that like still comes up to a lesser extent, and it's frustrating because it's like the more boundaries you set, when people benefit from you not having boundaries, setting a boundary is going to have this explosive response from those people. And then it can be hard to the point where a lot of people will then rescind their boundary, or they'll shift their boundary, which then teaches the person pushing on the boundary that boundaries aren't actually boundaries, that they are up for negotiation. So the hardest part of learning how to set boundaries is being able to deal with people responding to them negatively and move on from that and not have it affect you to the point where you then alter your boundaries, because that is one of the most difficult things, where it's like really, especially when you love and care about the person and you don't want them to be upset, there's this natural desire to try to change your boundary to make that other person feel more comfortable. And it's something that I think that a lot of people struggle with, and I don't think that it's talked about enough. And then the other thing with like the family dynamic, and like I've been trying to find a way to put into words this thought, which is why like this is why I like doing lives, because it lets me kind of just like rapid fire talk. But like one of the things with my dad's death that has been more difficult to kind of put into words is this fact that it's like you can love someone, you can appreciate the growth that they had in their life, you can think that there was amazing things about who they were as a person, but you can also acknowledge that there was aspects of them that were not okay. Like especially my dad years and years ago, for like a lot of my childhood, there's things that were not fair to my mom, that weren't fair to me and my brothers, and that were unhealthy. Like he engaged in behaviors that by definition would have been abusive. Did he do so to be malicious and mean? No. Is there this component, especially when we're looking at Black families, with that generational trauma where it is more normalized to some extent? And this is not saying that all Black people do this, but there is traits and patterns where spanking is more normalized. Because Black people were so horrifically abused during the slave trade, and that trauma does follow people. So there's aspects and belief systems that were present in him that were outdated and a sign of like his lack of inner work at that time that negatively impacted me and my family and my brothers. And that can exist while also being like, I love this person and he was my dad. And like, to his credit, like he had all of these difficult things happen in his life, like the stroke and becoming permanently disabled. And he worked on himself a lot during a time of his life where a lot of people would have used that hardship as an excuse to just double down and stay the way that they were and not make changes and just be miserable. Like, I don't know how I would respond to losing the ability to walk and run and do the things that I love and be as limited as he became because of his disability. I don't know how I would handle it. I think I would at least temporarily allow it to completely ruin my life. And he bounced back and he built this beautiful life and he had more progressive views and he changed and did so with a traumatic brain injury, which is really admirable. And like, I admire him so much for that. But there's like this duality of like, he created a lot of childhood trauma for me and my family, and there's certain perspective and views that he held and the way that he handled things that I do think have helped shape the way that my brothers behave and sometimes interact with me and my mom. And that doesn't mean I don't love my brothers. It doesn't mean that I'm saying that they're bad people, but there's this duality. And I think that that's one of the difficult things about being online is that there's this big pressure to have these very black and white perspectives where it's like someone is either good or they're bad. So then in order to justify to yourself that your parent isn't a bad person, you then need to defend their behavior. You can't hold them accountable. You can't honestly look at like the harm the behavior caused. You have to make excuses for it. And then I think this is where we see a lot of people become adults who defend spanking children because they were spanked as children and they don't want to have to sit with the fact that like, hey, your parents were probably doing the best that they could at the time, but that doesn't mean that their behavior was okay. That doesn't mean that they were doing that they were handling things the best way possible. And it's like, as the new generation, we can make changes and do things differently to prevent repeating the same traumas. And like, part of the reason why I haven't done a video on this yet is that like people that only see things in black and white would listen to parts of it and they would just go, oh, so your dad's a bad person. You're saying, why are you even sad about him dying if these things happened? And it's like, I've lived 30 years of my life and a lot of things have happened. And like, there's also like things that explain why people behave a certain way. It doesn't justify the behavior, but it explains it. Like when my dad had freshly had the stroke and he was just coming home, he had a really bad traumatic brain injury. Like that is what a stroke is. He literally lost part of his brain. So his emotional regulation was fucking terrible. And it wasn't great even before the stroke, where he definitely had anger problems, but it's like following the stroke, it was like even worse, right? So like he became more volatile temporarily and did things like less so to me because like being the youngest and being the only girl in the family definitely brought me protections. But like he hit my brothers, like, and that's not okay. Like it's not okay, but it's like the context surrounding it explains why someone might do those things. It does not justify their behavior, but it humanizes them. And even with all the stuff that I talk about with horse welfare, I think one of the biggest frustrations and the hardest parts of being online that I'm trying to find a way to navigate and parse down into digestible enough posts and videos that people can actually truly take it in is this idea of the duality of man, where it's like people can do terrible things to their horses. They can engage in training methods that are harmful and abusive. That doesn't mean that they're a terrible, villainous person with no redeeming qualities. A lot of horse people that we see doing certain things are doing what they've been taught to believe is correct. They're doing what they think is right. And most of the time, a lot of people don't even clock their behavior as abusive, especially when you're looking at anyone who has been in an abusive relationship and you're looking at the abuser in that relationship. You would be very hard pressed to find an abuser that has the foresight to look at themselves and go, I behaved abusively. Some might be manipulative to admit that at times and then revert back to the same behaviors, but generally speaking, they would not clock themselves as an abuser. And if you called them one, they would get really pissed off. Because there's this idea that an abuser is this villain that is forever evil and like that, instead of a normal fucking human being that has been taught that certain behaviors are okay for whatever reason. Lint. Yeah. Yeah, Nick and I still live together, for anyone who's wondering, but we're moving. Yeah, I'm on live. Sorry, I wanted to give context. He's my buddy, though. We're friends, and so is Lind. But yeah, like it's like an abuser doesn't have to just like they're not gonna be this notorious super villain, and I think that painting that picture is actually damaging to victims because it leads people to not identifying certain behaviors as abusive because. Pardon? No. Yeah, it leads people to not identifying certain behaviors as abusive because they have this belief that like if this person was an abuser, they wouldn't love me the way that they do. And it's like that is not the case. You can love a being with all of your heart and still engage in abusive behavior. And you can be abusive without being aware of the fact that you're being abusive, which I would argue is the case for most people that engage in abusive behavior. Most of them would not clock their behavior as abusive. So with my content, like I've been trying to figure out a way to have it head in the direction where I can have these conversations and portray this type of nuance without having it be as lengthy as what a live is. And it's really hard to do because it's like life is so nuanced that you can't compartmentalize everything into small digestible content. And with being online as long as I have, one of my biggest frustrations is like already in life, I often feel misunderstood and like people don't actually understand what I'm meaning and that I cannot find the words to have them understand. And like since being diagnosed neurodivergent, like it explains why. Like I do think that I think a lot differently than people and I make connections that a lot of people's brains just don't work the same way as me, and I think that's part of it. But the other part is that I find that a lot of people will only listen or read snippets of the content that I put out, and then they draw their own conclusions based off of how it emotionally makes them feel, especially with the horse welfare content, where if I talk about divisive topics, people go, I don't like the way that makes me feel. It makes me feel like she's calling me a horse abuser. And then they run with that and then they vilify me and make me out to be the bad guy because they feel like I'm going out, oh my God, Lint and Queso are playing in that corner right there. Wait, it's weird. Right there. And it's difficult. So it's like I'm trying to find a way to capture the nuance that I feel like needs to be said because it's like I think these conversations need to happen and I think they have the potential to make people who even wouldn't typically like my content feel more seen and understood because I do think that a lot of people who are the most defensive about harmful training methods are coming from a place of hurt. And I think they're coming from a place where they're doing their best and they don't know other solutions and where they've been normalized and had things taught to them and they don't have an alternative. So then when someone says that what they're doing is harmful, it feels very personally attacking and they don't know how to change. And I do also have a theory that a lot of people who are the most comfortable with defending physically hitting horses and using the harsher forms of training, I think a lot of them come from backgrounds where they may have been treated in a similar way as a child. And I did a post about this on Facebook, and like I want to add the caveat that that's not to say that if someone is spanked as a child, that means that they're going to become someone who hits and beats horses up. That's not the case. It just means that if you're unhealed and you haven't healed enough to sit with the fact that like what happened to me as a kid is wrong, we shouldn't hit people we love, then you are much more likely to defend and repeat it and have personal interest in defending what is happening, which is also why we see so many people defending spanking children to such an extent, because having to admit that it's wrong and that it's psychologically damaging to children means having to sit with the fact that what happened to them was not okay. And we see a lot of people that go, I was spanked as a kid and I turned out fine. And it's like, if you're actively defending hitting children, you did not turn out okay. That is not a normal response to have. We should not hit kids. We should not be advocating for hitting any living being as a form of training because that is going to rupture and damage your bond. And it also doesn't show them what the right answer is. And it's also operating off of fear-based tactics. And another thing that I have noticed with a lot of people is when we see people who lie and cannot take accountability and that they make excuses for what they're doing. Again, another correlation, and I'm pretty sure there'd be studies that would confirm this, is people who have been punished for their behavior are much less likely to take accountability, like where they've been especially physically punished with fear-based tactics and coercive tactics. Because taking accountability means that you are going to get blamed and you are going to get punished. So lying, deceiving, hiding what you did, making excuses is a safety mechanism to try to evade that punishment. So I think that a lot of people who can't take accountability come from that type of background. And additionally, in the horse world, what I see is I talk a lot about how I used to handle horses and how it was unfair to my horses and all that jazz. And I often get responses to that are like, you're just a bad person. You should have never done that. Like, you don't deserve horses. And their response is to punish me as the person I am now, which is punishing someone who has underwent change. And we should never punish behaviors that we want to see. If you want to see people become better horse people and become kinder and more ethical to their horses, when they've put the work in to take accountability and do those things, you shouldn't be retroactively shaming them for stuff that they've already owned up to and made changes for, because then you're punishing the behavior you want to see. But the people who do that are people who haven't had it be safe to be vulnerable and take accountability and to apologize, where they have been punished and they haven't been shown that it is okay to take accountability, that you're not going to get hit or mistreated or have your parents freeze you out and take away things that matter to you. So I think a lot of it stems from that too. So the interesting thing in the horse world, and like this is why I've also talked about more about human mental health and the human component of it, is that I think that we're seeing like this boiling pot of all of these issues that are just ongoing in human society that are much more condensed in the horse world, especially because typically speaking, what we see in the horse world are a lot of white people, very privileged people, people with money, especially when we're referencing the competitive show world, especially the English show world. And that is not a judgment. It is just a statement of fact. There is a reason why at the top levels of competition, the vast majority of those riders come from money. And even the people who think that they don't, if you look at how they grew up, they come from more money than the average person typically. So then we have these viewpoints where it's like these people are sharing similar views and they have a similar sheltered background where they haven't had to consider the perspectives of other people. And this is where it's like, I think the context of how I grew up and like my family stuff and the stuff with my dad is so important, because at face value, I could look like I'm one of those people who has grown up super privileged, had access to wealth and money, and always had access to that. And like my parents' wealth when I was young, 100% was what allowed me to have access to horses in the way that I have. They put me in lessons. I got to compete when I was young. They bought me a horse. Because my family had money growing up. But when I was about 10 or 11, they went bankrupt and we lost everything. And then I started having to work at the barn to help afford my horse. And my mom, to her credit, somehow managed to find a way to like keep me at the barn by sacrificing a lot of her own stuff. But like we had no money. We were living paycheck to paycheck. So it's like I've had a taste of what it's like to grow up wealthy and have stuff handed to me and see how easy it is to access the competitive show world when you have parents who pay for it. And also a lot of my success as a professional, you can trace back to that early access as a kid, because I was able to become educated enough as a rider to be good enough at riding to get free opportunities given to me. Whereas if I had less money and I was a beginner, I wouldn't have gotten those same opportunities. And then there's this other aspect too with being biracial. The fact that I'm white passing and biracial means that I have the lens of being a minority figure without being openly treated as one by most people. So that means that people are oftentimes more comfortable being racist in front of me when they don't know. But it also means that I've had the opportunity to hear a lot of stories from the Black side of my family and have that history and learn that. So I think that I'm in a unique position when it comes to advocacy for that reason, because one, I have the minority status to an extent, even though I'm white passing. But the fact that I'm white passing is actually an asset, because if I was darker skin tone, I fucking bet you money that I would not have the platform that I have today. People would not listen to me. They would not listen to me to the same degree. I would be discredited more. I would experience way more racism, and I would be treated differently and regarded differently by society. And I would probably also get different job opportunities than what I did. This isn't to say that everyone that I've worked with has been racist, but like, even if they have racist undertones and racist biases, it would have impacted me more if I was less white passing. So I have this privilege of having built this platform, having been seated in this position as a minority figure who is largely regarded just as a white person. And that means that I can cover these things and these topics with the nuance of having some lived experience with them, and also being able to pull directly from family members who have that lived experience even more so because they're darker skin tone and they're actually regarded as Black. And use my platform to bring it to light, which is what I did recently with a post where I was talking about the connection between anti-Black racism and curly hair. And unfortunately, that post wasn't received well by everybody. It was received well by a lot of people, which was great. But a lot of people read that post and they were like, well, white people have curly hair and they get discriminated against for it too. And I was like, well, if you read the whole post, you would find that the discrimination against curly hair stems from anti-Blackness, but it impacts white people too who have curly hair. Because this idea that curly hair is inherently messy and dirty and unkempt and needs to be tamed. And that stems from anti-Black racism. There's literally studies on it that show the correlation and the discrimination that Black people often face. And it's something where when I call people out on that, where like, because this is not a one-off occurrence where people who don't like my content, their gotcha to attack me oftentimes stems with my hair. I've been called a poodle. I've been told I have nappy hair. I've been told that it's unkempt. I've been told that it's dirty. I've been told that I need to fix my hair, tidy it up, brush my hair, all sorts of things. And it's like the fixation on the hair, whether or not people clock me as biracial, is racially motivated. And I think that that's something that more people need to sit with the discomfort of, because you don't need to act with intent to be racist. It's the same thing as like people who are being abusive. You can be abusive without deliberately going out of your way to be an abuser. You don't need to be like, I want to be malicious. And same with racism. You don't need to be like, I want to be racist, so therefore I'm being racist. That's not how we define racism. Racism is a systemic discriminatory bias against marginalized people for the color of their skin. And you don't need to do it intentionally. In fact, most people who are racist probably do it unintentionally. But where it becomes intentional in certain ways is when you are called on it and someone goes out of their way to try to educate you for why you are engaging in a microaggression or doing something that is racist. If your knee-jerk response is to go, no, it's not, and then just completely invalidate someone else's experience, then you are more directly participating in racism, in the sense that you are now upholding the stigma behind microaggressions, talking over top of someone's lived experience and trauma, and refusing to listen to a person of color who's correcting you. So I set a lot of boundaries on Facebook over this because, and it also has to be cruel. Is that correct? No, it doesn't have to be cruel. Like, for example, growing up, people loved touching my hair without my permission. That is racist. Going out of your way to freaking touch curly textured hair just so without asking. That is racist. It is oftentimes really well intentioned because it, generally speaking, comes from older women that love my hair and really like it, and they are just excited about it and they want to touch it. So it doesn't even have to be negatively intentioned. It can be someone doing something that they think is kind, but there's those undertones where it's like you're feeling entitled to touching someone else's body because you find their hair exotic. Another example is like people with much more like 4C type hair, like afro hair. A lot of times, like if they get braids, for example, it's really common for people to ask them if it's their real hair, and it's like there is a racial component to that too. And like that's kind of a little bit more of a gray area, because you could argue that like, oh, white women get extensions and blah blah blah, but there is this thing with hair with Black people. You're better off just not fucking saying anything. Unless you know the person really well, like you're better off just like not crossing that line. But like it doesn't have to be intentional. Like a lot of people engage in racism without intending to, and like the most frustrating part of it for me is when you call someone on something and you're like, hey, like actually that is racist, and then they get defensive and they start making excuses and denying and invalidating your experience. Because like growing up as a kid, I hated my hair. I watched all of these TV shows and consumed these movies where the before image was always someone with my hair type, where it was portrayed as ugly and undesirable, and that the preferential thing was to have straight, sleek hair. And it made me feel really insecure, and it was something that I carried with me until after high school. It took me until after I was out of school to actually start embracing my natural hair. And also, it's like for when you're going to formal events and stuff, a lot of people think that curly hair is not like formal attire. They think that it needs to be messed with and that you need to apply heat to it and relax the curls. And there's a lot of pressure on people to not wear their natural hair. And like now I wear my natural hair way more often than not. Like the last time I straightened it was like for Halloween. And then like before that, like I think it's been years since I straightened it, right? So it took me a long time to like unpack that. But that was like this bias that was taught to me from a young age. And then like I also used to go back east and I would go hang out with like my black side of the family and I would get braids done. And then I'd come home to the West Coast where there's way less black people, especially back then. And I would be made fun of for my braids. And then I got so insecure that I stopped getting them. And that's just another example where it's like if kids were taught to be more accepting of different types of cultures, that type of thing wouldn't happen, which is why it's so important to check people on these things and educate them, because you don't need to understand exactly where something stems from in order to listen to the person telling you like, hey, this is the history of this and this is why it's racist. Like there's a lot of like covert ways to be racist in society called like microaggressions, where they are seemingly small things, but like when they add up, like they build this perspective that is harmful. So it can seem like people are nitpicking, but it contributes to a broader issue of shaming people for traits that are adjacent to Black culture. And there's been, especially in North America, there's been a lot of anti-Blackness. And then there's like the flip side of it too that's a little frustrating as well, is like when styles change, people will go out of their way to look a certain way and obtain traits that are associated with Black people. And that is where the frustration comes with like cultural appropriation. So for example, like dreadlocks have become exceedingly more common for white people to wear. I personally don't care if a white person gets dreadlocks or braids. However, I see why other people get upset, because they haven't been allowed to freely wear their hair without shame and without having it be like struck down by certain workplaces. And they've been made to feel uncomfortable in their own natural cultural hairstyles. And now people are repurposing them for fashion and getting applauded for it. So that is abundantly frustrating, and I understand it. So it's like, I completely understand why people would call it cultural appropriation. But on the flip side, when someone like me gets braids, because my skin is so pale, especially when I haven't tanned at all in the summer, people will tell me that I'm culturally appropriating. And most of the time it's white people. So this is also, again, where it's like, mind your fucking white business and learn when to shut your mouth, and don't typecast people based off of how you think biracial people should look like. Like I've literally had people ask me like, oh, like what percentage Black are you? And it's like, I don't fucking know. And then they'll see my dad and they'll be like, oh, he's light skinned. And it's like, well, yeah. Like, do you want to go through my family tree and you can go back and you can see when people in my family tree existed because they would have been the result of assault? Like a lot of people, when you're looking at Black culture, yeah, there is like dilution to the family tree because there's going to be children that are the byproduct of interracial marriages. That doesn't change the fact that they're Black. Like my dad was regarded as a Black man. And like even interestingly with my family, like my papa is going to be doing a book soon on our family history, but like our history is really fucking cool. Like my family is cool. They're amazing people. And my papa, his dad, so my great grandpa, he started like the first credit union back east in Ontario that would actually lend money to Black people, and it was called Colored Credit. And I found that out when I was visiting to be there for my dad when he was in the hospital. And it was the coolest fucking thing. Like, their history is so cool. And like, even for my dad, regarded as a black person, light skinned, so he would experience less racism than someone who is darker, most likely. He was also a phenomenal athlete, which again got him better treatment than what a lot of other people might experience. So there's these certain hoops that you can jump through as a racialized person in like our world, where you get treated better if you're enjoyable to watch in sports. Like, my dad was a football player. People love football, especially back east. Like, football's much bigger in the US, but like back east there's way more football stuff. So he was like treated like a god, and he would have gotten better treatment than someone who didn't have like the same degree of athleticism as him. And he's also a conventionally attractive person, so he would get treated differently. So there's like racism, and then there's colorism, and people who have more traditionally black traits where they're darker skinned, they are going to get treated differently. And then also, yes, they're also fetishized, which is another thing where people will fetishize black people. And we see it honestly, like, I'm just gonna say it. Like, people, I've noticed certain celebrities getting a lot of work done to have more ethnic traits. Like, white people, celebrities getting work. Kylie Jenner is one that comes to mind immediately, where they get work done because they want to have ethnic looking traits. And it's ironic because if you look back in the day, like, we see all these women, and again, I'm not gonna shame women for doing what makes them feel good. If you want to get lip fillers, you do you. However, I'm just saying, like, you are going after traits that are associated with black people and that they used to get shamed with. Because if you look at the caricatures of like back in the day when they were making like anti-black cartoons, one of the things that they really over exaggerated was the lips, because black people tend to have really big, beautiful lips. And like, shout out to my dad, because I have nice lips, and they're one of my favorite traits. And then like there's just certain traits that are associated with black people that are now becoming fashionable that people want. And like, yeah, the Kardashians are very fucking guilty of that. And Ariana Grande, like, she used to have a black scent that she did as well, and like that was fucking weird as well. Like, that's the other thing too, is like, people will, whether they intentionally do it or not, because like, I could believe that someone just did that because they think that it sounds cool. They don't necessarily know where they're taking it from. But yeah, like, there's these things where it's like, people love black people for like how beautiful their skin is, like, how beautiful their features are, how athletic they are, and like, also they tend to be very good dancers and musicians. And people will love them for those things, but then they still perpetuate racist rhetorics where they're like, I don't want to have racism directed at my favorite black person who is the quarterback on my favorite football team, but I'm still going to engage in racist stereotypes on a regular basis to people who are not as enjoyed by me on TV, basically. And then also we see it with, like, again, like how they're talked about in the media. Like, anytime you hear about a black kid getting arrested or murdered by the police, they will often take these boys and call them men. They'll call girls women, and they age them up to try to justify what happened to them and try to sanitize it instead of looking at it and going, these are children. And yeah, like, yeah, exactly. As a mixed black native person who is darker skinned, I experience more anti-blackness and colorism than black people who are lighter skinned. And yeah, like that's the exact thing too, where the colorism also sometimes even exists in the community where, and again, I understand the frustration, and it kind of goes back to like what I was saying with cultural appropriation, where it's like, I understand why people are so frustrated. Like, it happens way less frequently than white people not minding their business, but I've had black people get mad at me for talking about some of the struggles that the black community faces, and they're just like, well, fuck you, you're so white. And it's like, yeah, I get that. I didn't get to pick how much melanin that I had. Like, I would love to be darker than I am if I had been born that way, but I'm not. I'm the lightest child in my family. The printer ran out of ink for me. Hi, Lint. And but it's like, I acknowledge the privilege that I have from that all the time. Like, I know that I'm regarded as a white person, and generally speaking, the only people who clock me as biracial tend to be other black people or biracial people. Hi, Lint. You here? You need to come sit in my lap? He's like underneath my chair. And And it's I get where they're coming from, because it's like this thing where it's like I don't understand their lived experience anywhere near the same extent. But I've made a lot of effort to learn about it from the stories of other people and to talk to my dad about it. Like, my dad was one of the first people I called when I walked out of that job with the racist trainer. And he told me, and like I still remember what he said because it was very telling. He was like he told me he really respected my decision to just like walk out and quit and not work there anymore. And then he said that in talking about that situation in the future and in sharing it online and sharing that experience, he's like, I think that that's good to do, but be careful how you word it, because if you come across too aggressive, people are going to look at you as if you are like the angry Black person. And that stuck with me because I was like, yeah, like when people react to racist treatment and they get rightfully frustrated, like I'm super white, so I still wouldn't experience this anywhere near the same way. But like if you get treated, if you're a dark skinned person who gets treated like shit and someone's openly racist to you and you've had a bad day and you snap and you yell at them and call them out, your behavior is going to be what is more criticized, not the person who is fucking racist to you. Unless you happen to be surrounded by people who watch the interaction and aren't super fucking right-wing conservative and racist themselves. But it's like the reaction to the mistreatment oftentimes gets fixated on more than the mistreatment itself. And then that is what is fixated on. When it's like, personally, like I think a lot of people of color have a really good reason to be fucking angry at the state of the world. And the fact that things are better than they were, it's like the bar is on the fucking ground. The other thing that I would like to note, like especially for Americans, because I think that your school system doesn't teach you to the same extent about like just how fucking horrible it was. If you're curious and aren't going to be too traumatized, I invite you to go look at some resources from Black authors about the reality that was the slave trade and what followed, because it is so much worse than you could possibly imagine. It is so much worse. Like, even in like the most graphic TV show or movie that has tried to depict it, it is so much disgustingly worse. The level of dehumanization and mistreatment, it like every year pretty much during Black History Month, I'll learn something new that I didn't know before. And like, I'm never surprised, but I am disgusted, and like it is really difficult to sit with the fact that like people would have stood by and let so much of the things that happened happen, and how the people could be effectively dehumanized to that extent. But then in like the modern world, with like how people are referring to like immigrants and the whole response to like illegal immigration, I think that paints a very apt comparison, honestly, because listening to people refer to illegal immigrants as aliens and like basically clap for the fact when they're killed by police or have the shit beat out of them, and when they're illegally arrested without a warrant or any real reason, or like when people who have their citizenship are arrested. The way that people respond to that, I think, speaks volumes. And then another example that kind of really opened my eyes was how people are responding to Palestine and like the treatment of Palestinians. Like the people that can just go, oh, just bomb them. And you're raining bombs down on populations of like families and everyday people just like you and I. Like, to have that level of disconnect from it is fucking disgusting. And it's like that's another thing about my channel is like I think a lot of people would think that I'm super radical, but I don't really think it is radical. Like, I think war is so fucking stupid. It is so dumb. Like, it's like we have a bunch of fucking toddlers running countries that have no skills to really talk things through and fix things in a peaceful way. And the fact that like in this day and age we're still needing to kill each other to try to make a point is fucking embarrassing. Like, it's so disgusting. And like not only that, it's like not just the deaths of people, it's like we're fucking raining pollution into a planet that's already dying. Like, what are we fucking doing? And yeah, we've had multiple Americans murdered in the street on camera by thugs with their face covered and nothing happens. So imagine what happens to people who aren't even citizens. Exactly. And also like that's just what's been caught on video. Like, imagine if your phone is dead and your friend is getting harassed and you can't get a video of something. then it's your word against everyone else. And even with the videos, people see shit that's not even present in the videos and they defend what they're seeing. But yeah, war is profitable. That's literally the only reason it continues to exist. Everyone's profiting off of the fact that, like, a lot of people don't have money. We can't afford to live. We're stressed out. We can't do the things that we really enjoy. And they're profiting off of the division that's being created and the infighting and the desperation. And it's really disgusting. And it's like this small minority group of extremely powerful, wealthy people. And like, I hope I live to the day to see that all fucking topple and come raining down, because like, it is just so unjust. And like, yeah, it shouldn't be radical to be like, we shouldn't kill people to freaking like win a war. Like, we shouldn't be like, war shouldn't exist. But if war didn't exist, a lot of people who are making trillions of dollars wouldn't be making money. So that's why it has to continue in their eyes. But like, it could be so different, because if that money that was going into war went into feeding populations of people and building community, people who are, even the people who uphold this structure and defend the presence of war and like want that to continue, like, they would be happier people if we built more community resources and had people have access to what they need, and like, we gave people housing and we gave people food and there was more community. Like, I fundamentally believe the way we are living now is not how people are meant to live. It's super individualistic. There's no connection to the community. There's no people don't feel like they owe anyone anything. And also, a lot of people are scared of their neighbors and other people. And I think that like, if we had more community where it was more normalized to be like growing gardens with your neighbor and like exchanging the veggies that you grow, and maybe your neighbor has chickens and you trade for eggs and you guys are all friends, and it's like, when you need childcare because you're overwhelmed and you are overburdened, you have people who can step in that are right there beside you to come help you. And then it's like, it also doesn't traumatize children as much because their parents aren't freaking so overwhelmed and unable to keep their head afloat. Like, I do think a lot of abuse and mistreatment of kids, like, for my parents, a lot of the traumas that I had in childhood were stemming from the fact that they were overwhelmed and there's too much going on and there wasn't enough support and help. And like, like, it also just shouldn't even be controversial to say that everyone deserves food. Like, the fact that we throw out so much fucking food because it can't be sold is insane. We could feed everybody and feed them food that is perfectly fine to eat, but the grocery stores and the people who own them care more about turning a profit than they do about feeding people. And like, that right there should be fucking criminal. It should be completely illegal. Like, I don't even understand like how we've created a societal structure where people have this idea where it's like, oh, you need to work to eat. And like, a lot of people believe that, but like, if you believe that, just like for anyone listening, if you believe that people need to have a job and be productive in society by going to work in order to deserve food, water, and shelter, you are telling a population of disabled human beings that they don't deserve to live. And there's no fucking way around that, because it's not up to you to decide how disabled someone is. Not all disabilities are going to be visible to you. But if you fundamentally believe that people who cannot get up and go to work and not only go to work, earn enough money to be able to afford rent, food, and everything that they need, you are telling people that they don't deserve to live if they are unable to work. And that is fucked up. And like, basically look in the mirror and maybe self-reflect a little bit if that's how you feel, because that is an insane thing to believe. Yeah, like, fast food places are a huge thing. Like, even like, I used to work in the restaurant industry before I started my business. And yeah, like, it's gross how much food is thrown out. I don't even think I could stomach working at a grocery store because it would rub me such the wrong way to throw out the amount of food that I know that they need to. And yeah, like, the ugly vegetables thing from the market is a problem too. Like, there's more companies that are coming forward now to like sell ugly veggies for cheaper, which is great. So that helps. But it's like, I think it's going to come down to where it's like, we need to have more gardens and people need to become more self-sufficient, which is also why I'm getting the fuck out of the city, because I'm like, I want to be able to, like, my vision for myself and for the people I love in my family is to basically have a large enough plot of land that you can grow your own food, you can have chickens and stuff, and that you all share off on work. And like, if people have kids, you're sharing off on childcare and like animal care and stuff. And it's basically no different than living in like the suburbs, in the sense that like, you're not living right on top of each other, but you're around close enough that you can help each other. And that's my vision, because it's like that makes the most sense. It's like when you have elderly aging parents, you have people who can support and caring for them at home without it burdening any one specific person. So it's like this whole vision that I have, and like stuff is starting to fall into place. So it's like in the long run, that's the goal that I have. And like something that's also been frustrating with my content is that like I know that these discussions are divisive enough that a lot of people do not like my posts because I talk about these things and it makes them feel uncomfortable. And it also, like, posting about Palestine, for example, really tanked me in the algorithms. The algorithm suppresses shit like that. Like, it got flagged. So that took a hit to my following too. And ironically, not going to say this for sure, but like the people who hate my content the most, I do think probably come from very hyper conservative backgrounds, and that's why they're so triggered by the things that I say. Because like just anecdotally noticing my own connections, a lot of the people who defend hitting horses the most have really, really right wing conservative perspectives. And like I think if we did a study on that, I would be proven right. I can't say anything more than that. That's my opinion of what I've noticed, but it's still relevant to me. And I think they hate my content the most because I am questioning a lot of their deeply ingrained belief systems. They have probably, a lot of them are punished into harboring those belief systems because they're not allowed to think individually from their parents and people like that. And so, like, I've gotten shit from people like that where they'll periodically come to my page and they'll be like, "You're such a loser. Like, you've been trying to gain followers for so many years and you don't get enough views and blah, 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 blah." And they'll base my entire value system off of how watched my content is and how many followers I have, or like my growth in comparison to other people. And it's like, anytime you're fucking comparing me to someone in this niche who does not open their mouth to breathe a word about any important systemic issue, that's not a comparison you can make, because they're doing low blow, like typically dramatic content, or content that is like basically playing Stardew Valley, which is not a bad thing, but it's like, yeah, that's more palatable to all sorts of groups of people because you're never making anyone uncomfortable. So of course more people are going to like your content and watch it because you're not getting suppressed in the algorithm, and you're also not pissing off anyone by stating a political opinion that they don't like. For me, with my content, like, I'm kind of here for the long game. I do think it's going to end up working out in my favor, and I think the tide is shifting. And I think that more and more people are going to end up resonating with the stuff that I have to share. Obviously, I can't say that for certain, but I do believe that. And even if that were not the case, I'm not in the business of selling out my belief systems and who I am as a person to be more liked online. Like, I want to find my community of people who have the same types of views. And if people really don't like my content and they hate what I have to say, then they aren't meant to follow me or whatever. And like, yeah, it's the same thing where it's like a lot of people who are very, very right wing in their perspectives, they hate the idea of using positive reinforcement. And I personally think that that is because they didn't have it used on them. It feels like an injustice to offer horses a kindness that you were never afforded as a child. And then that comes out in their behavior, where that it makes them angry, because I think it's coming from a place of hurt. I think that they feel hurt that people haven't listened to and understood their pain, and that they haven't been validated enough and allowed to be individual and make decisions that are important to them and be the person that they truly are. Like, I think they've become a caricature of who they were meant to be because they have been so suffocated by the belief systems of their parents and other figures that they haven't ever been allowed to develop a true sense of self. And I think that that comes out in what they don't like. Do you think religious people who believe animals are put here by God for humans can ever be truly successful with positive reinforcement? I think it's difficult to say because, like, you could have those belief systems and not necessarily apply it as a reason to just be saying that you get to use animals for whatever you want. Like, I have seen people that have those views where they're like, they were put here for us, but not in the sense of like, now it's their job to serve me no matter how I treat them. So I think that it depends. But I do think that, like, a lot of people who have those types of perspectives use it to try to like the opposite of anthropomorphize, like dehumanize, but they're not humans, but dehumanize animals and basically like make them out to not be sentient. But I do think that, like, a lot of the issue with positive reinforcement that we're seeing is the fact that we live in a punitive culture where people are not being rewarded for doing the right thing. Like, so much of our societal structure is based on punishment. Like, let's even look at like petty crimes. a fine is a punishment, and fines are set flat rates, generally speaking. You don't get fined as a percentage of your income. So what that means is that certain crimes are only crimes for poor people. If you can afford to pay the fine and not be hurt by it, then you can commit that crime and just pay a fee to do so. So that's like another example of where it's like our culture is built to uphold a class of rich people and keep poor people beneath, where they have less rights because you can't commit crimes if you can't afford to. Like for speeding, for example, it'd make way more sense. There'd also be more tax revenue if we did crimes like that, where you're fining people based off of the percentage of like what they're actually making in their life. And like, sure, people can like hide money in offshore accounts and like whatever, they can lie or they can not do their taxes, but it's like that would still be a more reliable way of appropriately fining people based off of how much money they actually have. But we don't do that. And then there's also the standpoint of like the entire legal system is fucked because it's super expensive to get a lawyer. Yeah, sure, you can get assigned one for certain things for free, but they're going to be people who are newer to their careers, typically speaking, and might not be as knowledgeable as someone that you pay for. So it sets rich people up for success in court, even if they are in the wrong. Moreover, for like people who don't have money for like civil court cases, if you can't afford to continue in court and you can't self-represent, then you just lose. You can't keep going because there's not funding in place. And like finding a pro bono lawyer is nowhere near as easy as what people think. So there's all of these things that make it so that people are like inherently disadvantaged if they don't have money. So with that in mind, it's like we also look at the culture where it's like so much of the stuff that we do, it's not about rewarding the correct behavior. Because if we were rewarding people for being kind and community minded and helping each other and contributing to building a better world, a lot of the people who are the most rich would not be so, because the people getting rewarded would be people who are actually contributing to the world in a meaningful way, not just hoarding wealth. But then we punish people where it's like, if you do something bad, you go to jail, you get a fine, and you get that happening without really any type of emphasis on rehabilitation. So then people who are committing crimes and doing things, like even if the crimes are wrong, like even if you assault someone, if you've been led to that point because of childhood trauma and being completely let down by society again and again, and then now you're in prison and you're basically just being taught how to be a better criminal and coming out with like less access to things to rebuild your life than what you entered with, there's not really any incentive to change. Whereas if we ran prisons as like rehabilitation programs that were like heavy on mental health reform, I think we would see a huge benefit to people across society. So that's like another one of my controversial takes is I think the prison system's fucking stupid too. And that doesn't mean that I think we should just turn dangerous, violent criminals loose and let them do whatever they want. But it's like the system, if it's not helping heal them and whatever might have led to their behavior, you're putting dangerous people back out on the street after they have like after they've served their sentence. They're not coming out better. And if they're not coming out better people, it begs the question of like, what's even the point in prison if we're not letting people leave as like better, safer people who are more likely to contribute to society and do things that are positive. And just from like the behavioral science standpoint, like learning about how punishment works and how largely ineffective it is and how many risks there are for it, I've become even less supportive of stuff like that because it's like, it makes no fucking sense. Like we have decades and decades of long scale studies showing how poor physical punishment is at actually positively rehabilitating behavioral problems. Like it does not work. In the moment, it might suppress the behavior in the moment, but it runs a high risk of follow-up behavior, future aggression, reactivity. And like this is why this is a hill I'll die on. It's not about making anyone feel bad if they've ever punished their horse, for example, but it's like there's a big difference between being reactionary in a situation where you were scared and didn't know what to do or when you didn't know better and continually defending physical punishment as a primary means of resolving behavioral problems. Two different things, because you can honestly look at it and go, I know that this is not the best means of solving this behavioral problem. And you can still make the mistake where you react in a way where it's like, okay, that's not what I wanted, or you're in an emergency and you handle the emergency however you can. whatever. Big difference between doing that and advocating for it as a primary means of discouraging unwanted behavior. Because at its core, all behavior stems from something. So if you're not dealing with what is actually driving the behavior and you're only focusing on suppressing the behavior itself, you aren't fixing anything. You're just creating a ticking time bomb that is more likely to mask certain behaviors. And like to the point of the person saying that some people can't be rehabilitated without prison, where do you put serial killers? What I would encourage you to think is like, what creates a serial killer? Because realistically, we don't really have a societal example that shows like that is showing like what would happen if we did earlier intervention for children, more mental health access, actually running prison as a rehabilitation center. So we can't really even speak for to what extent those people could be rehabilitated, because in Canada and the US, that's not how prisons are being run. What I would also like to note is if you look up the statistics on serial killers by country, it is very eye-opening, to say the least. The US is like the biggest hub for serial killers. So what we should take from that is that there is clearly something in the culture of certain countries that is creating these types of people. And when we look at countries that have more social programs, they don't tend to have the same crime rates. So I think it's pretty fair to say that if there was more community funded housing, mental health treatment, childcare, and all of these things, that we would have less serial killers. Because the statistics support that idea. Like, being a serial killer, unfortunately, is a very American thing. This isn't to say that they don't exist anywhere else, but they're not anywhere near as prolific. So with that in mind, it's like, why don't we take from countries that have the lowest crime rates and also the lowest reoffense rates in their prison systems? Because like the reoffense rate in the US is super high. But if we look at prison systems that are run as rehabilitation and offer people more freedoms and are about actually resolving their issues, the reoffense rate is quite a bit lower when we look at countries like that. So there is information out there that shows where we could make these changes to make a positive difference. And unfortunately, it is just very suppressed and it's discouraged, and a lot of people don't want to hear it because it would completely flip the system that we are in on its head. And what I would encourage people to also consider is like looking at our system, who benefits the most from leaving things as they are? The people who are currently in power. So of course they're going to tell you like, oh, there's no way that would work. We don't have the money for it. Meanwhile, they send like billions of dollars more each year off to war. And it's like, oh, well, we can't afford social housing programs. Another fun example I have for you here in my home province of BC is that BC spends more money policing homelessness downtown and like destroying homeless encampments and breaking all their shit and putting them in prison and doing like policing the shit out of them. They spend more money doing that than they would housing them. It costs more. I'm paying more of my tax dollars to fucking harass homeless people, to have the Vancouver police harass homeless people. And I'm paying more money for that than I would be to fucking house them. I would rather have them housed. But then we also have people who feel like it's an injustice to house people and meet their needs when they did not have someone come through to help them. Where there's this mindset where it's like, because I suffered, everyone else should have to suffer. And that is also kind of a crazy mindset where it's like you're not fully healed if that's the mindset that you have. For me, like I suffered, so I want other people's lives to be easier. I don't want people to have to move through the things that I did in my childhood feeling as alone as I did, because I also could have turned out very differently. I could have been a different person. I could have gone down a very different path, and I could have been angry at the world, and I could have chosen to take my trauma and use that as a reason to lash out at other people and not want other people to have an easier life and not believe in mental health supports. But instead it's like the opposite, because it's like, I don't want other people to suffer the way that I had to. I don't want people to feel as alone as I had to. I don't want people to have to wait as long to get their ADHD diagnosis as I had to, because I was simply unaware of it. I only knew ADHD based off of stereotypes before getting exposed to the neurodivergent community online. And like getting that diagnosis was very validating. It changed the course of my life because it taught me about myself in a way that made me feel less shame for being the way that I am and made me understand myself better. And like something as simple as that can make a huge difference for someone, especially if you help them get to that point earlier in life. And it's just like, I agree that, like, yeah, people who are dangerous and a risk to society, we shouldn't just be letting them run loose on the streets. But it's like you could open rehabilitation centers that have like tiered programs where it's like once they have completed certain aspects of that rehab program to a certain degree, they get different privileges where you're slowly seeing how they do with more freedoms in a safe, controlled setting. And like having them move through these treatment programs in a safe, controlled setting before they're ever turned loose in society. And like even when they do eventually leave the rehab center, it's like you could have halfway houses with like security guards and people. You could have things in place to make sure that they're not just being turned loose to just go roam in society and do whatever they want. And like I do think that like the fear of that exact thing where it's like, oh, turning serial killers loose and having them kill everyone, like that fear is used to uphold the current system. And we see it happening in a big way with the discussion about illegal immigration, where people are like, they're murderers and serial killers coming over here. That's why we need them out. And it's like, go look at the crime stats. Go look at who is most represented in US prisons. It is US citizens. Go look at how many crimes, like violent crimes, US citizens commit compared to illegal immigrants. The call is coming from inside the house, is all I'm saying. So the finger pointing and the fear mongering to have people redirect their rage to minority groups is a tactical move on the part of the people in power, because they want you to be fucking mad at the people that they are targeting to eradicate. And this has been a consistent theme across governmental structures that we see. Like it's like I wasn't even like a big history student. Like I didn't appreciate history to the degree that I should have in school, but I remember learning about the uprising, like the uprising of like the Nazi party in Germany and like how they did it and the propaganda they used. And like as I have watched the years progress with like the Trump administration, there are so many parallels that can be drawn. And like we are all being collectively gaslit by so many people who are like, oh no, there's not. Like there's no parallels. It's completely different. And it's like I think the problem that a lot of people have is like when they're looking at things in hindsight, they like to believe that like I would be the revolutionary, I would be doing the right thing, I would be advocating for people, and I would protect my neighbors. And it's like, no, you wouldn't. If you are being quiet on your social media and not saying anything and not doing any community stuff and not going to protests and just like otherwise being like placating of the current system, like that's what you would have done back then. If you would be the type to be radical and revolutionary and speaking out and trying to push for a change in the system, you would be doing it right now. And I'm not saying that to be mean, but it's like I hate people bandwagoning and trying to be like, oh, I would do blah 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 blah. And it's like you're not even doing the easiest part. Like you could post a fucking social media post once about one thing. And you're not doing that, but you want to believe that you fucking stand up to a Nazi with a gun that's trying to take your neighbor. Like, shut up. Like at least like fucking be honest with yourself, you know? Like it's like whatever you're doing now is what you would be doing, because they are taking people out of their houses, they are violently arresting people, there are people being murdered in the streets. And also like the other thing I can't get on board with like so much of this stuff is like people would be like, oh well, like if you don't want a cop to kill you, like don't resist arrest or like don't argue with them. And it's like even if you're guilty, like cops shouldn't be killing guilty people either. Like, they shouldn't be killing people who have committed a crime. Like cops shouldn't be fucking killing people. Like we should not be putting cops on a fucking like pedestal where they can do whatever they want and make decisions that end people's lives willy-nilly. Like that's not okay. Like the fact that that's even an argument that people are having is so fucking crazy. But it's like the revolution is here. Whatever you're doing now is what you would have done back then. And if it makes you uncomfortable to look at your behavior now and think about you sitting by and just like supporting the Nazi party and watching your neighbors get taken away and watching people go to concentration camps and blah, 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 blah. If that makes you feel bad about yourself, maybe change your behavior. And you don't necessarily have to do it in a big way. Like I get that I'm really public on social media and I'm outspoken. That's not going to be the way that everyone contributes to a revolution. There's other things you can do if you're uncomfortable with being in the public spotlight to that degree. It doesn't all have to look the same way, but it starts with shifting your mindset and changing the way that you do things. I have to look up who Brittany Simon is because I don't know who that is. But thank you. And also thank you to the person that sent me a gift. I'm really loving your positive reinforcement content. I'm wondering if you have any basic positive reinforcement training on your Patreon. I'm trying to train my little steer in the best way possible. Yeah, I do have a bunch of the foundational tutorials and stuff for getting started with positive reinforcement on Patreon. And like if you do the $15 tier, you'll have access to the whole backlog library of stuff. And there's stuff with like target training, the neutral head position, and all sorts of things. So yeah, I would recommend the Patreon for sure. Yeah, I don't think resisting arrest should be illegal because it's literally going against human nature, especially if they don't have a fucking arrest warrant. Like, what do you mean? Like, you should resist when police are overstepping their rights and doing shit that's not okay. But yeah, like whatever people are doing right now is what they would have done if they were living through like 1940s Germany. That's a hill I'll die on. And I can confidently say I wouldn't have fucking stood by and watched that shit happen because like I'm not doing it now. But I think that in hindsight, it's very easy to look at something when you see the full scope of how appalling it is, and you're looking at like once all that information comes out and public opinion has changed, it's a lot easier to be against it, because being against it during the moment means that you're going to alienate yourself from people at work, your neighbors, family members, friends, and it means that you have to be outcasted by people who aren't comfortable doing that or who agree with what's going on. So in the moment, it's a lot harder to do, and that's why a lot of people don't do it, because they want to be comfortable. And there's a quote, I can't remember who said it, but it's something along the lines of like, the people who supported the Nazis were always nice people. Like, they were good neighbors, they were nice to people. They weren't kind people, but they were nice because they knew how to keep the peace, and they just did what they needed to do to fit into society and be perceived as nice, but they wouldn't rock the boat. And being nice isn't good enough, because it's like being nice to someone who is a terrorist that is harming other people. You shouldn't fucking be nice to them. You should resist. But it's easy to look back in hindsight and think about the revolutionary you would be, but it's like whatever you're doing in the present moment is a much more accurate descriptor of that, because it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable. I've lost friends. I piss off certain family members. I have lost lots of followers. I've probably impacted my business earnings because a lot of people don't want to buy shit from me, because like when I was posting pro-Palestine stuff, and like I did a fundraiser a couple years ago through my store, and people didn't like that. So it's like I lose income, and I lose support, and I lose friends and family members' support by being the way that I am. But it's like the alternative to doing that is to like abandon my own value system. And that's not something that I'm willing to do. And also, like, I don't really want money from people who need me to be a shittier person in order to care about my content or to want to shop at my store. Like, that's not who I want money from. And I think that this is also the thing where it's like I've kind of come to terms with the fact that like the easiest way to get rich and be super well off is to be a bad person. And that doesn't mean that every rich person is a bad person, but it's like it's a lot easier to make money and to do super well and to enter that demographic of people if you don't care about other people as much. It is easier. Like, if I didn't care about horse welfare as much, I would be making more money as a trainer. If I didn't speak out on political issues, I would be making more money in my store. I'd probably also have more followers. A lot of the people who hate my content the most would have loved my content when Milo was bucking and bronking and being stressed all the time. I would have had more opportunities afforded to me where it's like I would probably be further ahead financially right now if I didn't do the right thing. And like even with my store, like I have frustrations because it's like there's stuff that I would like to do in my store and change, and it's like I'm constantly sidelined by money. Like I would love to be able to make like cactus leather or plant leather bridles, but producing that as a singular person is so expensive. Like I cannot do it on my own. And like so it's like this thing that I constantly have to push to a future time where I have the capital to do that, but I don't have it. And it's expensive. So that's the other thing, is even with the bridles I sell, if I sold bridles with flashes on them, I would make more money. 100%. If I pandered to the competition audience that wants restrictive bridles, I would make sales and they would like my stuff. But it's like I will not sell a bridle with a flash on it. I don't want to do that because I don't think it's ethical and I don't think it's necessary. And yeah, like that's the other thing too, is plant leather is a risk because one, like I don't know how it's going to react. I've never handled plant leather, so I'd have to do prototypes and I'd have to pay to get enough prototypes, because usually, like especially when you're doing alternative forms of leather, it's more expensive, and there's a certain order volume that you need. So it's like I'd have to do the prototypes, I'd have to do all this stuff and test it, and then if it sucks, then it's like now you're out all that money if you can't sell it. Or if you get it and you like it and then you try to sell it and no one wants to buy it, then that's also a problem. Also, the cost per item is usually higher because of how much harder it is to resource those things. And then part of it being harder to resource is the fact that like less people are doing it. So the more people that do it, the cheaper it'll become. But it's all these things. So it's like I low-key need like a freaking angel investor or like a business partner that comes through that has similar perspectives than to me, that has like lots of money. But like unfortunately a lot of the people who have lots of money don't want to do things the way that I do them. And like I don't want to, like my business is like my baby. And yeah, plant leather might also not be as flexible as regular leather. Like the thing is, I don't think I'd replace the regular leather completely. I just think I would offer plant leather for people who want them. And like, but yeah, it's like that's also why I haven't done biothane, because I find that biothane traps way more sweat. I don't like how it feels in my hands, and I understand a lot of people like biothane, but like I don't. So I don't want to bring it into my store. So like my leather alternative would have to be plant leather or maybe cork. I've seen some cork saddles, but I don't think cork would work for a bridle. So I don't really know, but like that's something that I would love to do. And then like I've also had this idea that I want to do where again it's like one of those things where you need the capital to pull it off, because doing it as a one-man show labor-wise would technically be possible, but doing it in addition to everything else I already do would be hard. But like I also had the idea of doing all of my clothing designs with like thrifted clothes, and then having the designs embroidered and printed on thrifted clothes, and then just doing it by style and color, where the colors would be slightly off because I'd be buying stuff that is a similar color. Like if it's green, it'll be multiple shades of green, for example. And then that's a way to bring in products that are thrifted without having it be like super like you know, where it's all like yeah, like I use recycled fabrics for a lot of my stuff, but it's not the same. Like I want to be able to go to a thrift store and buy things and put stuff on it and then sell them, but it's like for me to learn how to embroider on my own, that's a lot of work. Buying an embroidery machine on my own is a lot of work. Embroidering the volume that I would need is a lot of work. So it's like I need like a fucking team, or I need capital to like hire a team, or I need people that will invest their labor into the business knowing that it'll get paid back once it's like stuff is sold, but to not be able to pay people. Because like that's the other thing. It's like I don't want to hire anyone to help me if I can't offer them a good long-term job. Like my friend that has been helping me lately has another job, and like we have this understanding where it's like I'll pay you for your hours, and then now we're kind of working on something where I'm like, let's see what we can do where it's like I'll give you a percentage of sales or a stake in the company rather than paying you hourly, because I think that'll end up working out better for you in the long run. But like I'm not comfortable promising you a consistent job until I know that I can financially do that, because I don't want anyone to be screwed over if I end up needing to like let people go. So it's like that's why I don't have any staff. Like I don't want to fuck people over, and I don't want to not be able to pay them well. So like really the only regular staff member that I have is like my one friend that helps me stuff, and then I have a barn worker, and it's the same thing with barn workers, where barn workers get paid like fucking shit, and I pay them more than what most barns around here do. And like the barns that pay like shit have 20 plus clients in their barn that are paying like $3,000 a month to be there, and it's like they should be able to afford to pay their employees better, but they don't. So that's like the other thing where as a business, like I think it's kind of bullshit for people to be like, oh, we can't afford to pay them, when it's like I look at the volume of sales that they have and how they conduct their company, and it's like their company has scaled more heavily than mine, and they are making more money than me, so they can afford to pay people more. Like it's untrue that they can't. And like that is something that I've learned as a business person, where it's like I don't believe that you can't afford to pay your barn workers $22 an hour if you have a barn full of clients that I know are paying you a premium to be there. And it's like boarding horses is not usually a good money making venture, but if you're doing full training, it definitely is. And like the labor is probably one of the more expensive parts of the payment, but it's like when you are a barn worker, you are a trades worker, you're a skilled tradesperson, you're working with dangerous animals, you oftentimes have no healthcare benefits or unemployment benefits if you become injured. So like the pay needs to reflect that. And paying barn workers minimum wage is unethical. Like that is fucked up and insane. And to be fair, like the work that I have here is like not very hard. Like it's like picking a track and putting hay out. And it's like an easy work, and I'm super flexible. Like I don't have set times that they have to come in. I'm like, just come when works for you kind of thing. As long as you show up, I'm good with that. And that's about it. So it's like a pretty chill environment to work in overall. But it's like, I can't imagine fucking paying people like shit. Also, thank you to the person who sent a gift. That's so nice of you. I really appreciate the support. But yeah, like people who say that they can't afford when their companies are making more money than I am, it's like you're full of fucking shit. If you can't afford, then like pay yourself less. So I guess that's one of the other things too, where like when people have been trying to poo-poo my content, something I've gotten a lot is like, oh well, like you're trying so hard, and you're like always like struggling for money, and like you're poor, blah blah blah, and they're like making fun of me for that. And it's like, well, yeah, because I don't fucking pay myself as much as certain people do, you know, like I would rather be making my own life harder than having people that I'm profiting off of the backs of getting paid pennies for doing all of the actual work. And it's just like I just can't. And like also it's like my life hasn't been easy. My family's had lots of struggles. There's so many things like that go on unseen behind the scenes over the years of YouTube and stuff that have happened that like I don't share at the time because like it's not anyone's fucking business. But it's like you like people don't get it. And then that's also something that I've noticed in the horse world too, where there's this elitist mindset where people look down on anyone that they consider poor. Like they think that people who have less money are inherently less good at taking care of their animals. Like I've seen some terrible comments about people talking about homeless people who have animals. And like, again, this is anecdotes, but like they have some of the best cared for animals I have seen. Like referencing the people in the downtown east side that have dogs or cats, like their animals always look like they're in amazing condition. They're friendly, they're fit, they're never fucking overweight, but they're also never looking malnourished. And even if they were, the issue is the fact that the animal is being malnourished or not having their needs met. It's not the fact that the person is homeless. So stuff like that really bothers me because it's like rich people can neglect their animals all of the time if they want to, and like they do. Like we see it happening in really expensive horse barns as well, where horses have their needs being fully neglected, and they're not getting what they need. But they're in a fancy barn and they have tons of money put into giving them fancy massages and shit. So apparently that cancels out the fact that they live inside a 12 by 12 box for 20 plus hours a day. And it's more taboo to call people out on that. Meanwhile, it's like when someone is poor, it's more acceptable to be like, oh, well, like your fencing doesn't look as good. Like that's another one where they're like, you have all electric fencing. It's like, bitch, like if you're gonna fucking put in 10 grand of wooden fencing on a property you rent, like that is stupid to do. One, I'm gonna use portable fencing when I don't own the place or if I have like no long-term plans of being there. And yeah, like that's the other thing is in the vet industry, it's like people find a way to care for their animals. And this is also why it's like I'm never gonna die on the hill of people asking for mutual aid for highly expensive vet bills because it's like that's you finding a way. And if people want to donate, they get to choose. It's not like the animal's foregoing care. They go and get the care first. They go into debt, and then they fucking ask for help if they need it. And like mutual aid is not a bad thing. People get to choose to donate, and like people freely chuck money at billionaires to buy their shit. And no one ever questions how a billionaire is spending their money. But like poor people, they're constantly having their money micromanaged and told what they can do. They're told what they can ask for help for, when they can ask for support, and it's fucking bullshit. It's total bullshit. And it's like if we all helped each other out and like if mutual aid was more accepted as well, there's people who would have more help with their lives and wouldn't suffer as much. Like if you could chip in a $5 bill and make someone's life abundantly easier if you do that in a group with other people, why wouldn't you do that? That's literally the entire concept of what taxes are supposed to be for. And yeah, like I do think that it would be cool to build a societal structure where there's healthcare included for animals as well. But considering a lot of Americans don't even have healthcare, I think we're a long way out from that. But I think that would be cool to be able to claim animals as dependents, because like this idea where you're only able to claim a dependent if you have children, I don't think that's very fair. I also think that rental properties shouldn't be able to say no pets. That's a hill I will also die on. As a vet tech, it's the people who pull in 100K plus cars that accuse us of being in it for the money, refuse diagnostics, or bring. Yeah, that fucking tracks. that tracks. I believe that 100%. Also, people are so shitty to vets and like vet techs and like because I had people comment on my videos of Lint when I was talking about all of his health issues, and they were like, "Oh, like the vets were just trying to scam you and shit," and it's like, no, they weren't. They were trying to diagnose him, and like it took a long time because he was so ill when he came in for normal reasons, because he was so flea infested. He had a huge worm load and he was completely emaciated. So like his symptoms persisting for longer wasn't a weird thing. And then when he was getting to a point where his health was becoming more stable and then the symptoms kept persisting, then that's when further diagnostics were done. And people would say that the vets were trying to scam me out of my money if they went for the most expensive diagnostics first. So they did like a normal blood panel, which is totally valid because usually it's not the most complex thing. And then we did the thyroid panel, and like the only thing I would change, and like again, this is still not their fault, is the fact that like I think that a gastric panel, like a gut panel, should have been recommended before the thyroid panel because of how rare thyroid issues in kittens are. Like especially hyperthyroidism. That's like the only thing that I think should have been different. But I think the reason why they suggested the thyroid panel first is because it's cheaper. And people always give vets so much shit for billing too much, so they didn't want to ask for the most expensive panel. And like I still don't blame them for that, because it's like EPI in cats is really quite rare and it's starting to get diagnosed more, and it's like they were doing their best. This idea that they were trying to scam me out of money is total fucking bullshit, and it pisses me off when people say that, because it's like people go into like hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt just to become a vet, and like it'll be years before they're paying that off unless they had a family that could afford their schooling. Additionally, like it's long shitty hours where you're constantly being abused for not enough pay at all, and they're devalued as doctors, honestly, like vets are. Like another hot take I have is, personally, I think if you sign a waiver, like let's say I got hit in the face with like a frying pan and I split my forehead open and I need stitches, I would rather pay out of pocket to go drive to my vet and have them stitch me up, if they legally could do so, than go sit in the hospital waiting room for 4 hours to have it done there. And like the vet would also probably do a way better job of suturing. And I wish that that was legal, because there are so many times where like I've had to go into the clinic or into the ER for things where it's like if you need stitches or something, and I've thought about it where it's like, fuck, I wish that it wouldn't be malpractice for me to just go call up the vet, and I could literally go drive to their house and I could pay them like whatever they want to get stitched up and save myself 4 hours of wait time. And like ER doctors suck at suturing. Like my vets do the cleanest sutures. They do them on animals that are fucking struggling and like having a hard time. And like, yeah, like they're way better at suturing. Like, dude, Banksy cut open his face, and like he had like it's you can't see it at all, but like I had a photo of it and everyone was commenting on the suture job because it was like the most beautiful job ever, and like they do such a good job. Like I so wish that we could just fucking do that. It sucks that it's like not a thing. The cost of vet care is why I'm looking at pet insurance, but the problem with pet insurance is a lot of them don't cover certain conditions. I use Trupanion, and like the monthly cost that you're paying into it is honestly quite high. However, I wish that I had gotten Lint insured, because I would have saved like $4,000. But with Queso's pancreatitis, it covered 80% of his care, and it paid for, like, it was totally worth it in his case. So like that might be one to look into, but it is like not super cheap each month. Like I do find it interesting where it's like the insurance for the small animals is actually more expensive than the insurance for the horses. And yeah, like, and pre-existing conditions are a problem. So it's like the best to get the insurance if you have like a younger animal before they have problems, because then they're not going to insure them for any like problems that are considered pre-existing. But it can be really good. And it kind of also just depends on how long you've been paying into it before you need to use it. So it depends. Like, and like, I mean, depending on what they bill you monthly, it might just be worth it to put that money aside monthly into something. But I mean, like 80% coverage is pretty good. And they also pay like right at the vet, so that you don't have to like pay first and then get reimbursed. So that would be worth it. And Yeah, a lot of common things aren't covered under vet insurance, and I've considered looking to pre-existing. Yeah, it is really expensive, especially if that many animals. And yeah, it's difficult. But yeah, like the vet care stuff, anyone who says that vets are fucking in it for the money is literally delusional. They just don't understand the expense of things. Because like generally speaking, their prices are quite fair and they just don't understand how it works. And like vets get treated like shit. Like equine vets are like a dying breed because like no one wants to be a large animal vet. And like I get it because like I'd imagine being a small animal vet is still terrible with like how many neglected animals you must see and like the stupid shit that people like. I'm in pet vet corner and horse vet corner, and like some of the shit that people post in there like blows my mind. Where it's like, why do you even need to ask if you have to call a vet? You should be fucking driving there as soon as you notice that that's wrong with your animal. But like a lot of people don't want to be equine vets, and I think part of it is that it's more socially acceptable with horses specifically for owners to basically just dictate what care their horse receives. So for example, if the horse is lame and they don't want to pay for a full lameness exam, they can just tell the vet like, oh, just inject their joints with corticosteroids. And it's like you don't even know what joints are the problem, and if it works, you don't know what the actual lameness issue is, so you could be making the lameness worse. But it's like pretty normalized where it's like if your horse has a problem, you just fucking inject them without ever diagnosing what the actual problem is. So I do think that for equine vets, there's this amount of pressure to like really have to like be in this conflict between morals and doing the right thing and also appeasing your clients, because also a lot of horse people don't ever want to have to give their horse time off. So even if you diagnose the issue, if the solution to it is like time off of riding and they don't want to do that, then they're having to find like some other framework to try to make it less terrible for the horse to be put into that work. And I also find the same thing with farriers too, to some extent, where it's like if a horse has chronic hoof pain and their hooves have a lot of problems, there's this whole emphasis on corrective shoeing where it's like you should be able to make my horse immediately sound even though their feet are in shambles and need to be rehabilitated and healed, much like any other injury. But I expect a farrier to slap shoes on and make my horse sound to go jump a 3-6 course tomorrow. And if they don't, then they're a bad farrier, and that's fucking stupid also. So like the emphasis on having to keep horses in work, I think makes it harder to be an equine vet in some ways, because there's all of this pressure to have to fight with your morals to keep your clients happy. And I do think that that's where a lot of vets end up getting jaded or having problems like that. Like one of the things I'm saddest about with moving is that I have to move away from the vet clinic that I've used for the last decade. And they were just here today, and I was telling them, and I was like, honestly, like one of the reasons why I was kind of putting off moving for so long is because I really didn't want to have to like get a different vet. And like it's honestly like I'm gonna fucking cry over it, and like I'm gonna go bring them a gift and stuff. But like it made me really sad, and like that was one of the things that kind of prevented me from changing what I was hi mom changing what I was doing with like my move and stuff, because I was kind of looking into areas locally where I could have my vet still there. And it is going to be really hard moving because it's like I haven't met what will be my new vet. I have all of my horses set up on their files and whatnot, but I don't know what they're like the one thing I will say is that I have enough experience with a lot of different types of injuries and diagnostic procedures that I think my confidence in pushing for certain diagnostics and arguing with vets has grown to a point where it's like if I had a vet that I fundamentally did not agree with, I could hold my ground and be like, no, I want to look at this. I think it's this, because that's one thing that I think has been so special about the vet clinic that I use. They take me seriously even when there's like nothing clinically that's present other than a behavioral thing. And I'll call them in and be like, there's this thing I've noticed, and I think that like one of the times it was like, I think he has ulcers because I've noticed these behaviors. And rather than writing it off as like a training issue or saying that I just need to push him through it, they've always listened. So that's been valuable because you can't always find that with vet clinics. And yeah, like vet clinics selling to private equity sucks. Yeah, there's been a few places like that. A local vet clinic got bought out by like a big corporation, which is a bummer. So I hope the new one that I have isn't, but I don't know. I think it's less likely to be because it's in more rural town, but I guess that could also maybe make it more likely to be. I don't know. I guess we'll have to find out. But I'm excited to see what they're like, and I hope that they're good and that I can have like a positive relationship with a new vet. But it's going to be a big shift because um, I I'm going to be very sad. So I need to bring my vets like a gift before I go because I really appreciate them. And it's like I've been with them for over a decade. So it is going to be a really big change. Thank you so much for the gift, guys. You guys have been so gifty today. I really appreciate it. But it'll be for the greater good because like ultimately like what I finally came to terms with is the fact that like me staying where I am just for my vet doesn't make sense if I really am struggling with other aspects of where I live. And like I've found that the more time passes, the more ill at ease I feel in my current location, and the more like little daily things that I have to deal with have been bothering me. And I'm going to talk about this more in like a future video. I have to find a way to say it in a way that's not going to like hurt the feelings of people that I know that still live here. Cause like people do tend to take that stuff personally. It's not that it's a bad place to live. It's just like very far outside of like what I want and the direction that I want to head with my life and like what I want for my horses. So that's difficult because I feel like I am like a hermit crab that has like outgrown its shell, and I've continued to wear it even though it doesn't fit and it's uncomfortable. And like I'm finally at the point where it's like I need to get out of here because I'm going to claw my own skin off if I don't. And that's kind of what happened to me like this past like spring and stuff, where I was like, I can't do another winter here. I can't get rained on all winter. I can't have my horses living in the area that they're living in all winter. Like I can't do this. And then that's kind of what drove me where I was like, I need to move. Because I was like, I literally like the idea of remaining here in the winter with my horses, it made me want to not have horses anymore. And like, obviously I don't want to not have horses, but I don't want to be in a situation where it's like I'm having a hard time enjoying life and spending time with my horses and feeling happy because of where I am. And I do think, like, unfortunately for me and also for you guys, depending on how you feel about this, but like there's going to be some pretty depressing times coming up. And some pretty sad videos. And it's not that it's the wrong decision. It's that like this is such a big life change that it's going to be really hard. And yeah, I wish that too. Eventually, that's the plan. Eventually, though, is for her to be able to come, and she's coming with me. The one nice thing is that she is coming with me to go take up my first load of stuff, which I'm happy about because I really wanted her to be able to see the place before I actually move in, because she's not like seen it in person yet. So that'll be fun. So I'll get to show her around, and then like my hope too with this place is that like it's going to be a long-term thing. Like my plan long-term is going to be doing everything I can to buy out the other half of this property. And like that's also why with like my manifestation videos, this feels like such a aligned place to be, because what I had said, and like I didn't put this in my rental ads that I was looking, but what I had said was I said that ideally I want to find a place where I'm not going to have to move again. Like the perfect rental would be a place in my price range on at least 100 acres that has horse safe fencing and is set up for horses, and that eventually there would be the option to buy it. And that has basically been what has been handed to me on almost a silver platter. Not quite, because I still have to put work in and find a way to be able to afford to buy out the other half of it. But it's like I have this place that's been sent to me, where that's a possibility. And then like for renting too, like one of the things for me as like a tenant that I have found so frustrating, especially with having horses, is this fact that like the way I've described it is feeling like a potted plant, where it's like you're in a pot, you can't put roots down into the actual earth. You're constrained by the pot that you're in. So with renting, I have felt like a potted plant, where I haven't really built my life into a place and really made it my own and put the work into like building things for the horses and doing like things that are more permanent, because I've known that it's not permanent. And it's been frustrating because there's things that I look at and I see that I want to do, but it hasn't felt worthwhile to me to put the energy, money, and time into doing something when I know I'm not going to be staying there long term, and when I know that ultimately the place is not mine. So that'll be really exciting, is having the opportunity to build something like that, where it's like I can start to do these things where it's like looking for more longevity and really trying to make it my own, and knowing that it's going into something that is going to be there for time to come. And the other really like insane thing is like, honestly, like for anyone who thinks that I'm full of shit and that manifesting is bullshit, like honestly, what are the fucking odds that I'm gonna get like a landlord that believes the same woo-woo shit as me and like has similar perspectives and belief systems, that was born on my dad's birthday, happens to have over 100 acre farm with horse safe fencing, that is renting in my price range exactly what I want, and has the potential option to buy out half of, like, are you fucking kidding me? You know what I mean? Like, what are the odds of that? I think that like it being a coincidence is less likely than there being some like divine intervention or timeline. Like, it does feel like it's just been like brought into my energy. And like one of the things that was so telling to me is like when I went to go look at this place, like I talked to my new landlord for a while, and then like when I brought up my first load, she let me stay there, which is really nice, because I told her, I was like, I don't expect you to like open your house up to me. And then she was also like, oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't really know what to do for food. And I was like, I wasn't expecting you to feed me. This woman made me a grilled cheese sandwich. Like, hello? Like, she doesn't have to do it. She doesn't have to let me stay at her place for free. She doesn't have to let me into her house. And like, it was even stuff where it's like she was going to work, and like I was like, I'll go out while you're at work. He's like, you might not be comfortable having someone you don't know that well in your house when you're not there. And she's like, oh no, make yourself at home. And like, I still went out because I was like, I want to make sure I'm not overstepping. Like, I don't want to make someone uncomfortable when they're being this kind and generous. Um, but it's like all of these little things that have been crazy, and like we've been talking about stuff, and she's like, I felt like called to like message you, where I kept thinking about it, and I wasn't even thinking about renting this place, but I felt that I felt called to send you a message and talk to you. And then like the more we've talked, the more synchronicities and shit there have been that have come out. And it has been insane, where it's just like, and I'm sure there's going to be more as time goes on, where there's going to be all of these weird things, because like the other weird thing, like I'm kind of repeating myself because I've talked about some of this stuff in my videos, but it's so fucking crazy, where it's like my friend got me a painting print of like the exact mountain view that I have for my property. And like, again, like that was before I found this place, before I was messaged. And like, the other thing is like back in like mid-May, I was honestly in a pretty negative headspace because I was looking for a place. And I did get like this intuitive ping where I was like, in order to find the place that I meant to rent, I'm going to have to put myself out there and publicly say that I'm looking for it and use my pages to do so, which I did. And that's how I found this place. But back in mid-May, I wasn't having any leads, and I was feeling very frustrated, and like I wasn't going to find a place in time because like summer was getting close, and like I can't really move in the middle of the winter to the Rocky Mountains. Like, you could technically, but it'd be fucking terrible, and it would be way more dangerous for hauling the horses. So there's all these things where it's like I am on a time crunch, and I started to feel more pressure where I was like, I don't know how I'm going to mentally cope if I don't find a place. And then I started thinking about like, okay, well, like if I have to stay here for the winter, like maybe I can send my horses somewhere further out where they'll have more space and where I won't have to do the winter care on the track with how rainy it is. And then that was kind of my plan, where it's like, okay, worst case scenario, that's going to be what I do. And then I'm not going to be able to micromanage my horses and be that present in their care in the way that I wanted to. And then I also expanded my search radius, where I was like, I'm going to look at places in different areas, because like, I don't think I'm going to find a place in this area. Because the other thing is like, there's a housing crisis in these more rural communities, especially for rent. Like, if you can afford to buy a place, it's much easier to find a place. But for rentals, like I found the needle in a haystack, basically is what I'm saying. So like I was so frustrated, and I was like, oh my God, like I am not going to be able to find a place. And then I did. And I like, even like after I saw the place, I was like, this feels too good to be true. Like, I was so worried because I was like, I have to come back tomorrow to sign the lease. Like, what if she bows out and I'm going to be so disappointed and I'm going to be crushed, and it'll be even worse than like if I hadn't known about this place ever again. And then I signed the lease, and I was like, holy shit, it's actually happening. And then like the more interactions I have with my new landlord, the more like we are on the same fucking wavelength, and like we have similar goals. And it's like, now I have this person that I can work with to build these things that I've been thinking of, where it's like we can body double and bounce ideas off of each other and do things to help each other. And it's really exciting. So like, it's crazy. Yeah, I need to look into the studies behind ritual practice. And like, I've seen some of the studies on like where mentally, like, it rewires your brain to like feel things different. Like, and I think that's the thing is, with the manifestation practices, I think people look at it through the lens of it being woo woo bullshit, where it's like, you can't do that. But then they are missing the point where it's like, if your brain is anticipating a certain outcome, you're more likely to have your day to day actions change to facilitate that outcome. And like, that's what I think manifestation is, where I think like a lot of people, like when I posted one of my manifestation videos, someone got quite mad at me and they're like, some of us are struggling and you can't like manifest your way out of like poverty. And it's like, you can't, because like poverty is a systemic structure, but like there are little steps that you could take to change your situation, even if it's not to like the case of mine. Like, it's like, I wouldn't, even if I decided back when I was really struggling and had no money when I was in high school and I was fucking miserable, and then I decided back then, like, I'm gonna move away and find a place. It's like, it wouldn't have happened then because I wasn't ready to do that. And even now, it's like, I wasn't actually ready to start moving until after my dad died. And I do think him dying was like a catalyst where he's like, okay, like, I'm a head out. You need to fucking do some shit that you wouldn't do unless I pressure you. So like, he's just like, peace, get your shit together, fucking do it. And yeah, and then that was a catalyst for some major changes where it's like, even the bad things, I do think that they lead to good. And like, I would never be the type of person to be like, oh, everything happens for a reason, because it's like, that's not my place to say about someone else's trauma. But for my traumas, it's like this weird thing where it's like, I don't necessarily regret the fact that they happened, and I don't think I would stop them from happening, because I think I would be a very different person had they not happened. And my life would be different, and not necessarily in a good way. Like, I don't think I would be as compassionate or kind of a person if I had had nothing, if my dad never had a stroke and we never had these financial struggles and I just stayed in the show circuit competing and like being taught to beat the shit out of horses by my trainer. Like, I don't think I would have ended up coming to the conclusions that I have. And like, even with like finding a horse like Milo, who's changed so much for me, like, I wouldn't have discovered him if I had more money, because I wouldn't have gotten an SPCA rescue horse. I would have bought something more expensive. Um, and like, so there's all these lessons that I've learned through struggle, and like decisions that I've made through struggle that have been for the greater good of my life. And like, that's the thing where it's like, I don't regret those traumas or those things, because like, they've led me down what has been a beautiful path, even with like the hardship. And like with my dad dying, it's like, like, it sucks. Like, I don't, it's not like I'm like, oh, I'm glad my dad died, but it's like, him dying has led me down a path that I do think is going to end up being good for me. And I think that making this move is really brave, and I'm very proud of myself for doing it, because it's really scary. And I think the fact that I feel so good about it, and that I feel so good about like the property that I'm moving to and the landlord that is going to be on that property with me, is a sign that it is in alignment, because I have had more anxiety about things. And there's been all these decisions that I've made in the past that I've been so highly anxious about, and like, I haven't felt good about. Hi, Phoebe. Hi. Right, Phoebe? And like, it's led me to so many positive things. So it's like, not about like, if someone else fucking said to me like, oh, um, everything happens for a reason, you should be happy your trauma had to you. Like, even with how I feel about it personally, that would piss me off for someone to say that to me, because it's like, you don't know what it was like. But for myself, I can speak that for myself, where it's like, there's these things that have happened and things that I've learned. And I think that the context it has given me, and like how I can share those things with other people to hopefully help reach other people that might be feeling in a similar place to how I did years ago. I think that that is a gift. And like, I think that that is what I'm here for, is doing things like this. And it doesn't really matter. Like, if I'm not drawing the same audience as like other types of people, and this is where it also gets hard being compared all the time online with like what people do with creators. I don't like, quality over quantity, you know, like, I don't want to draw in an audience that's only here because they want like the dramatized, like sanitized view of life, where it's not me actually sharing my life as it is, where when I'm going through my biggest, deepest struggles, they want me to like put on a smile and be like, tack room tour, or just got a new horse, or I'm going for a ride today, let's go pack up her show, and just not say anything about like the type of person I am or what I'm actually going through. That's not what I want. Because I want people to know what I have gone through and what I have now, because I think that a lot of people without that context would look at my life now and go, she's so lucky, she's so unlike me, her life must be perfect. And I could make it look that way. I could make it look a lot more that way, and put on a show and do it just like that. But it's like, I want to reach people that think that this life isn't for them, that they can't do it. Because it's like, there's been a lot of times where I felt that way. And like the bottom line with like what I have done is that it's like, I'm just going to keep trying until I fail. And like every single time someone says you can't do that, I'm like, I will bet, watch me, fuck you, watch me. I might have to pivot and change my path a bit, but bet I'll do it. And in the past, I've talked less about that because it's like I don't want to talk about the process of wanting something. I want to already have it, and then be like doing things that way. But like I want to do that now because it's like even if I fail, that's just a redirection to go do something else and change the way, like change what the path forward looks like. So it's like my initial path might not be exactly what it is. Like my current plan with how I'm living and how I'm going to be doing stuff at the new place, that is subject to change. It's okay to pivot and reevaluate your plans because like I honestly don't fully know what my plan is. Because it's like I'm gonna have to develop a whole new list of clients. I'm probably gonna have to do even more virtual work than what I'm doing. But it's like I just have trust that it's going to work out because it's like I'm gonna have more opportunity to do things like this. And the other beautiful thing about this property, which is something I've been waiting for a while, is like what I really want to do and what lights up my soul the most is being able to do shit like this where obviously this isn't face to face, but it's like you get to sit around with a more intimate group of people and have discussions and have people share things that they've gone through in their life and connect. And I'm going to be able to do that in person because we're going to be able to run retreats at this new place. And we're like my plan that I would love to do. This is the tentative plan. And it's like I need to pull it off. It's not going to be a this year thing. I need time to get settled in. But what I would like to do, because my new landlord is a Reiki worker, so she's an energy worker, and that is already an awesome thing to have for a retreat. Oh, PD is a toy. And my plan is that I want to run retreats for basically like people to come to talk about like trauma and life and like rebuilding after and like literally anything. Like you don't have to necessarily have like some wild backstory that you want to share, but my idea is to run it not as a riding horses retreat, because I don't, no offense to random people, like I don't love the idea of just putting random people on my horses, especially on a repeated basis. I don't think it's like the most fair thing to the horses and they wouldn't like it. And like the most suitable horse to have is Milo, and Milo has done so much for me that it's like I'm not going to do that to him. So my plan is that I want to fence in the back area of my field, or like the area that's behind my field, and it has like this beautiful mountain view, and there's like forests and stuff, and it's amazing. But like my plan is to do these retreats where it's like we can have like fires and roast marshmallows and like talk about shit and do energy work, healing, and like sharing and like those type of team bonding things, but also where we can go hiking with the herd of horses on the property, and I could just open the gate for the regular area and they could follow us out back, and the horses get to choose what they want to do. People can interact with the horses, and we could have like circles where people are sharing and doing stuff, and we have horses that are close by, and do it in a setting where the horses get to choose whether or not they want to interact with people, where people can have the horses on the other side of protected contact if they're a little nervous, and basically have it like that where it's like you're pairing the connection with animals with the connecting with other people and talking about things so that people get to feel less alone. And then our other plan is that like to try to run this in a way where we're making enough money where we can offer free spots so that it's not just like something that only people who have the money to do that can have. So like ideally being able to make enough money to fund flying someone to come visit us, and offering like a free spot with like every retreat that we do. And like it would also be cool because it's like you get to be right out in the wilderness, but like the whole property is bear fenced, so for people who aren't from Canada, and like Australians are kind of the first ones that come to mind because like they have no big mega predators. So they tend to be more nervous of like, and same thing with Europeans of like what we have. So it's like the whole main part of the property is bear fenced, so like you're totally safe from major predators. And then when you go outside of that, like yeah, technically there could be bears, but like we'll carry bear spray and it'll be fine. And usually you don't see bears anyways, just like full disclosure. Honestly, like moose and elk and deer are probably more likely to attack you than a bear is. um, but like you could go out and do that and it'll be safe. And like the other thing too is like for accessibility, it's like the way that it's set up, like there's a bunkhouse already. And it's going to be more rustic because it's not going to like the eventual long-term plan is to be able to like build stuff so that we can like have like plumbing and like have like a shower and bathhouse basically. But right now it's like the bunkhouse has electricity, but it doesn't have running water. So they have like one of the pump things that's on like those big gallon jugs. And which isn't the end of the world. So it would be like more rustic, at least initially, but it's like if we can pull it off and scale these types of retreats to the point where we're making enough money to build more, then the eventual plan too, or like one of many plans, like I shouldn't say plan, like these are just ideas that we've discussed, is to like even consider doing like a bed and a bale service where it's like if someone wants to bring their horse and go camping with their horse, we could have an area where people could do that. And there's campgrounds where it's like more safe and rustic and you're not like at like a public campsite, and doing stuff like that. And it's like if you want to bring their horses for training with me, they could do that because I would love to help people take their horses on trails and like expose them to wildlife and do it in a friendly, nice way where it's enjoyable for the horse and not scary for the person. And do stuff like that. And then like also I will have the capacity to take on training clients in-house if I want to, which is like kind of the lesser of the options that I want to do because like I've just had so many instances with clients where even if we're on the same page for a while, where there's sometimes ethical dilemmas where I end up feeling pressured to do things that I don't feel are right for the horse, or where they don't want to put the money into like exploring vet issues that I think are like pain related, which is valid because I get that it's expensive, but it puts me in a difficult ethical place. And so that would be something where it's like I would do that in more moderation. I would also like to do more rescue of animals and horses, and like I really want to do orphan kitten rescue. It would be super fun. But is there many legal restrictions with that? Australia is strict with riding on people's property. So long as people are like insured, like I think that's the thing is we'd need extra insurance, and then people would have to sign a waiver. And the insurance would probably be higher if you're having people ride versus just being around the horses. So that would definitely be a thing. And then there's also a lot of crown land. So for riding on governmental crown land, it's kind of just like free use at your own risk. But for running it through a program, like we would need to be really insured just in case, especially because horses can be dangerous. But yeah, so like that's the plan. And I'm hoping to try to bring that to fruition in like the new year because it's just like the winter is kind of a write-off because Rocky Mountain winters are cold and no one's gonna want to come camp. Like at most it would be like a day retreat in the fall or something, but like that is the long-term goal, is to just do stuff like that and be able to like open my place up to people. And like technically I would have the option of like having, because I've had like a ton of people over the years ask me about like interning with me or being a working student, and like coming to stay on the property, and like technically I could do that. I kind of get like tweaky about like having strangers in my house with my animals, just especially with like how some people have been to me online, and like I would screen people really heavily, but that idea scares me. So that's something where it's like if I ended up having the funds to build like separate dwelling, I would consider that more heavily, but in the meantime, it would probably be for short stints. Because like, yeah, just the idea of having someone I don't know that well be in my house with access to all of my animals and all of my things, like really freaks me out. And like, honestly, most people would probably be fine. There would be a good chance that like I would meet someone who I'd become great friends with and it would be wonderful. But like the unknown of it makes my skin crawl a little bit. So like the idea of being able to put someone in a different location where it's like my house is still my sanctuary would be ideal, because otherwise it's like my privacy is so disrupted that I don't really get to like exist in my own house. So like that is another option, and it's something where like I think initially if I did something like that where they had to be in my house, I'd probably start it where it's like having people come for like a weekend or a week at a time. If they wanted to come in and learn from me, then I could do that. And then really heavily screen people, because like that's the biggest thing is it's like my animals are nice and like I love them, and like but like it makes me so nervous bringing random people in. Yeah, what if they are secret? Exactly, like that's my worst nightmare, is having someone come into my house that has ill intent towards me and then doing fucked up shit to my animals, or like going through all my stuff and like stealing stuff, or like trying to find like secrets or dirt about me. Not that I really have any secrets, because like I do pretty openly share a lot of stuff, but it's like, yeah, like actually my brother works for like a shipping container company, so that would actually be a very genius idea. And like portable housing is what we'd need, because you don't need the same types of permits and whatnot. It's easier to do, but that would be genius, because I could be like, hey bro, can you get me a family discount? And hopefully he would, otherwise that would be kind of shitty of him. But those are also great for shelters and stuff too, for horses. So it's like for doing like the bed and bale idea, that would be really great. Um, and yeah, so like there's lots of cool things that could happen, and like we could have all of these types of discussions about like people's frustrations with the system, and like how they felt like unseen in life, and like their struggles with neurodivergency, or like the trauma that they face, and like be able to connect it to like other people. And then like the long-term dream that I have, which is long-term because this would require a lot more planning, a lot more insurance, and a lot more money. But the long-term dream I have is like trying to set something up to be like an actual treatment center for mental health, especially like addictions treatment, because I find that there's a lot of stigma behind addiction, and there's also a lack of available places for people to go, especially publicly funded places. And that's the dream. And it's like I kind of already have my team that I would need for that, because it's like my best friend is a nurse and she wants to go back to school and become a psychiatric nurse. So that would be exactly what we need. One of my really good horse friends, Bree with the Equine Haven, is a clinical counselor and she wants to move to Canada. And I think that, yeah, pairing the animals for therapy would be amazing, because it's like when you feel so shitty about yourself and you don't feel like you can do anything right in your own life, and you hate yourself and you feel like a failure, if you can have an animal whose life you can benefit and you can build trust with and make them happier, it can help you feel better about yourself. And then through that animal, you can develop more self-esteem and you can work on yourself and you can feel better as a result. So my idea, like for my portion of the therapy, if we did it as like a treatment center, would be that I would try to pair horses with people that have similar trauma backgrounds and similar stories, and kind of do it where it's like we get horses in as rescues, and the end goal, if they are adoptable, is to adopt them out. But we do a lot of work through protected contact for safety, and you pair horses that have come from certain backgrounds with certain types of people, and then they basically get their own horse to work with that is just theirs and that no one else in the program works with, and then they get to kind of heal alongside that horse. So with people with addictions, what I would like to do, which also feeds into like my previous background working at the racetrack, is get ex-race horses who a lot of them have been like pumped full of drugs, like worked through excessive pain and have experienced trauma and have odd behaviors as a result. So if you paired someone like a horse like that with someone who has been in a situation where they haven't had much autonomy, where they haven't had their needs met, and where they have been using substances to cope, like I think that that would be a very beautiful thing. And then also like Mustangs would be another one too, where it's like Mustangs have been forcibly removed from their home ranges, taken away from their families and friends a lot of times, and like removed in a stressful way, and having like a stressful initial intro to people. And that would be another one too, where it's like I would love to do Mustang rehabilitation with people too, and like that would be something where through protected contact, it honestly would be pretty safe for people to work with wild Mustangs. Like the biggest risk factor would be maybe getting bitten, But if we did it in a way where people aren't pushing horses over threshold, the odds of them feeling the need to bite when you're not continuously approaching them or cornering them would be much slimmer. So I would build a facility to basically be functional to work with the horses almost entirely in protected contact, which is basically just having like a fence between you, because then it keeps people safe, because these people who are beginners with horses and don't have horse experience. So you'd also need to teach them all the body language stuff. But what I've found too is people who don't have horse experience tend to be more teachable. They don't have the same biases ingrained into them, or they haven't been taught to like ignore stress behaviors in the same way that the average horse person has. So then you're starting with like a fresh slate. And yeah, regarding equine assisted therapy, like that's exactly what I would be after. So I've been looking into like getting certifications for that and whatnot. So that would be a big thing. And then the other thing too is that I think if I was going to do training with people, I want to do kids camps too, because I think that the young generation and giving them like a good introduction to horses in a way where they're learning how to do it through a compassionate lens would be a really good way to reach people and make change. Like I think a lot of my fixation with trying to promote welfare first practices has been on adults because they're the ones that are using social media. But I think that being able to work with children in person would be a really great way to create a new generation of horse people who have been taught things differently. And also selfishly for myself, a good way to like help heal that inner child where it's like I get to see children have opportunities to be more compassionate that I didn't get to have as a kid because I was taught to do things so roughly. So I think that would be really healing as well. And yeah, no, and that is true that everything good takes money. And like that honestly has been one of my biggest frustrations because I feel like I have a lot of really good ideas that like I firmly believe would be actionable. I think they'd be profitable and I think they'd be successful. But the hardest part is getting those ideas off the ground because they require money to do so. And that I find really discouraging because it's like I look around the horse industry and I see all of these people with so much money and privilege that are doing things to horses that aren't ethical, but they have the money to do so. Like the barn that I grew up riding at that taught me all these abusive practices, I drive by it every once in a while, and like they have this big property, and like all of their horses are stabled almost 24/7. And when they do go out, they have these tiny little paddocks. They have the money, capacity, and space to fence more areas for their horses, and they don't. And shit like that drives me insane because I look at it and I go, if I had access to what you have, I would do it so differently, and the horses would be so happy. But like I try not to dwell on that too much or get bitter because it just is what it is, and it's like I just have to find a different path to accomplishing what I want. And I do think that like part of that is going to be community based, and it makes sense because if the goal is to build more community and to help reach more people and connect with people, like using community funding to make that happen makes sense. The detractant for that for me has been that like until I had the property to really make this actionable, it felt wrong to try to like crowd fund certain things to make it happen. But it's like now that I have the property, I can write a more firm business plan. And if people want to invest, they can. And I'm going to run it as like a crowdfunding project where people believe in what I'm saying here and what I'm sharing here. And they think that it's a good idea and they want to contribute, then they can. And that can also be how we offer scholarships to people who can't otherwise afford to be there is by crowdfunding. And now that that's all in place, like a huge deterrent for that for me was just like how people respond to any idea of mutual aid because I've been horrifically bullied by specific people for like anything mutual aid related where they say nasty ass shit. But it's like this is fucking community funding to give people access to things that will help them in their mental health and that are for the purpose of building community and helping improve people's lives and provide them to access to the tools and environments that they need to be in. And from an ethical standpoint, it's like that's not, it doesn't feel selfish to me. Yes, it's going to be a business, but also the goal is to also get it like start a charity and like get designated as a charity, which I've been talking to you about with like one of my family members who's a business guy because I didn't really know how that worked. And I was like, well, if you're running part of it as like a business, can you still get classed as a charity? And he's like, if you're doing certain like publicly funded things, then you have like a part of it that is charitable. So I was like, that's really cool. I didn't know that. And that opened another door. But like, it's like, that's going to be the plan, and like ultimately people can contribute if they want to. If they don't have to. And if anyone has anything shitty to say about the idea of offering free resources to people who need it for mental health problems and otherwise, then they are the shitty person. So it's like, I don't really care then if I'm being criticized. And I will be prepared to weather that storm when it comes. But like that, yeah, that's the plan, and I'm really excited about it because it's like this is the closest I've come to actually putting this into work. And like I've had this idea for a while, and it's been something that I wanted to do, but I haven't put the same amount of time to really thinking about it because it just felt so far away, and I felt like I had so many roadblocks and obstacles in my place to prevent me from getting there. And it's like now a bunch of those obstacles have been removed because like the biggest thing was finding a property that was set up to do this with. And like now the challenges that there are, like most of them are financial. Like for example, like if we wanted to build housing, that's going to be expensive. Like we're talking like tens of thousands of dollars to build, like even for container shelters. Like you could probably build like a small dwelling for around 10 grand if it's really, or like depending on how handy you are. If it's really like rustic, but it's like, okay, let's say at a bare minimum ballpark, we're looking at like $20,000 for putting like lodging in for people. And then like long term, it's like for stuff like if you're gonna have bigger crowds, like we need another septic tank, we need probably another well and like other things, and those are much more expensive. And then also if we tried to run power to other parts of the property, that would be expensive too. Or you need to get solar, and that's expensive. But it's like all of those things, like the only obstacle is getting the money to do that. And like that is possible by running retreats that are bringing in money, crowdfunding, and having people believe in it, and building this community environment where people want to participate. And then it's like also like if people feel inclined to, it's like there's going to be opportunities for people who want to come live and work to work there and help, and then we have more hands on deck to help for things. And like so the biggest thing is like money. And like I think that as far as problems go, generating the income to make this happen is one of the easier problems to solve, because like people want more places like this. And like when I have the opportunity to really do a proper walkthrough and show you the place, more so than I already have, like especially once my horses are there, you guys will see what I mean. It's a special place. And then like I'm sure at some point you're gonna also meet my landlord on my platform. She's also building her social media stuff, so I'm gonna be helping her with that too. But it's like I'm sure we're gonna end up teaming up to do like a live or a podcast episode or something. So you'll get to meet her too, and then you'll see even more so what I mean with that, where when you see the type of person she is and what she stands for, how in alignment all of that is. So I'm very excited for all of that. And this has been a very long live, so my apologies. Thank you everyone who's tuned in for this long. I really appreciate it. It's super kind of you. And like I love and appreciate all the support, because it's like we don't need a huge group of people to make positive change. We just need a small group of like highly dedicated people. And then from there, it's like the more you show people that certain things are possible, the more people who are invested in like seeing things differently. It's just showing people that it's possible, showing people that it's safe to believe, and that it's like that there's safety in being vulnerable, and that they're not going to get pushed out of the crowd, they're not going to get made fun of, they're not going to get chastised. Really, the only cost for entry is just caring about other people and animals and being open to reflecting and growing. That's the cost for entry. And it's like if you no matter what your past is, like you could have grown up being taught to beat the shit out of horses. That doesn't matter so long as you're entering this space ready to leave that mindset behind and not bringing that energy in. Your past doesn't matter. What you're doing now in the present moment, long term, is what matters. And like I think that's also going to be part of the healing aspect of it, is like learning to forgive your past self when you were constantly in fight or flight mode, and when you were taught to do certain things and having certain things modeled to you that you've now learned are not okay. Is like learning to move past that and build a new life and not just carry your past with you all the time. And also learning to be able to handle it when people try to make you carry that burden and try to bring up your past and hold you to being your past self. Like anytime someone tries to be like, oh, well, like you used to believe XYZ a decade ago, it's like a decade ago, I was such an undercooked human being that like that's not who I am now. Like you're comparing me to a different person. I'm a completely different. If I was the same person now as I was a decade ago, that has mean I have done no character development and no personal growth, and that would be a bad thing. Like the fact that this idea of like never changing is so normalized to the point where people think that it's relevant to be like, you used to believe this. It's like, well, yeah, I used to. That's not what I do anymore. And I've like owned. It's not even like I don't try to hide my past. Like all of my old training videos are up, and like eventually I'm gonna do some reaction videos to those old clips. But if they're hard to look at because it's something that still does bother me and like I'm ashamed of, but like eventually I'm going to do that. Maybe I'll do it on a live or something. So that would probably be the easiest way to do it because like having to record and then edit it after is harder because it's like I have to watch it twice. And yeah, like it's like I haven't tried to hide any of the stuff that I've done in the past or the belief systems that I've held, and like also like for a lot of the time that I've been on social media, especially in my early 20s, like my day-to-day life was so highly traumatic, and there's so many awful, stressful things going on that I could not escape from, and that I just had to cope. And I was in such a state of like learned helplessness that it's like, yeah, I was not my best self back then, full stop. Like I am embarrassed by how I behaved back then a lot of times. I was like super bitchy, super defensive, and really easy to rile up because I was just chronically under so much stress. And that doesn't justify the behaviors that came from that, but it explains them. Like I was dealing with stuff that a lot of people will never deal with in their lifetime, but I was dealing with it on a daily basis. And I will share that a little more eventually. The reason why I haven't gone into like super detail about that is that it involves like other people in my family, and I don't want to make them uncomfortable when they're still like in a somewhat vulnerable place. So there's certain things that it's like eventually I'm going to be able to share all of the stuff that has happened to my family, and it will make for a very good story where people are going to be like, holy shit, that doesn't sound real. How the fuck does that happen? And it's like, no, this is a lot of people's reality when they're undergoing trauma. It's like one thing after the other. And it's been hard to deal with. And I'm glad that like I've managed to build community online and like build the business that I have today and like find some level of freedom and independence to really chase this path and do what I want, because it would have made it way more suffocating and difficult. Like I don't think I would have survived if I hadn't been able to chase this passion of horses, and keep horses in my life and like work for myself, because it's like it would have killed me to be going to like a 9 to 5 at a restaurant all the time as my primary means of work. Like I don't think I would have survived the mental health implications of that. And even now it's like there's been times where it's like I didn't know if I was going to survive it. Like even as recently as like March, April, like and May, I was going through a really hard time, and I was so fucking depressed, and I didn't want to do anything, and like had such a hard time getting out of bed. And even still right now it's like I have a hard time getting out of bed, but it's nowhere near to the degree that was. And like I was having a hard time, and I was really depressed, and I didn't see a way out, and I was miserable, and I felt trapped in a life that I didn't want to be in, and I felt like there was no way out, and that there was no path forward, and that I had nothing. And I made decisions that like for example, ending my relationship, that made me feel more that way, where it's like I took away a safeguard that I had to try it just on the basis of believing that I would find the right place to move to and that it would all be okay. Because it's like if I didn't find this place, then now I'd be having to find a temporary place to move, because the place that I live in now, like I need to have a roommate to be able to afford to stay here. Because it's very expensive to live in the lower mainland of BC. So there's like all these things where it's like I was so worried about like how it would go, and then it's like everything ended up working out and like aligning, and it's like I made these decisions that at the time were really scary, and there was so much that was unknown, but it ended up guiding me in a direction that has brought opportunities to me that are going to allow me to find my highest self. And like I think even this part of like leaving everything here behind and going off alone without like my mom is like an important part of my journey, because it's going to be really hard. But I think that's an important part of identity building and learning how to live and enjoy my life without these safeguards that I've had in place. And I think that's important, where it's like I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's going to be hard. And like, to be fully honest, there's going to be a lot of videos of me crying. Like, give it until like definitely the last week of August, like between the fucking 24th to 31st of August, I'm going to be crying a lot. There's going to be a lot of crying videos. The day that I leave is going to be really hard, because that's going to be finality. And like, I've literally had to time budget crying time into my transport, because like when the horses are loaded and when I'm actually leaving and when I say goodbye to my mom, I am going to break down in my car for sure. For sure. Don't know how long I need, hopefully not too long. I'm going to allocate like 10, 15 minutes that I need to fucking get my shit together and drive 2 horses, a dog, and 3 cats 10 hours to my new home. And I'm going to be crying. And I've made like a playlist that's like my fresh start playlist. And it's like has stuff that is going to remind me of things. And I'm probably going to cry on the drive, but it's not going to be as hard as I'll cry when I'm leaving. But I'm going to cry a lot. That doesn't mean that it's a bad decision. It just means that it's a painful one and it's a big change and it's scary and it's going to be hard. And I'm going to cry a lot. And I'm going to share that on social media because I think it's fucked up and weird that we have become, like, as a society, so averse to sadness and grief that, like, people expect you to just crawl in a hole and be sad away from everyone else. And then it's like we have all these people who are sad and really struggling and they don't get to seek out community or hear from anyone who's struggling in the same way or get any comfort. And like I've had people be like, oh, well, that's what you do with like people in your personal life. You don't do that on people online. It's like online, you don't have to interact with someone. You don't have to fucking listen to someone cry or talk to them if you don't want to. You get to choose to. So if people choose to want to give someone comfort when they are struggling, that is a choice. And not everyone has people in their personal life that they can go to when they're struggling. So they need people who can come to them and share things. Like also, like for me, none of my friends have lost parents this young. Like I think I have one friend who has a deceased parent. The rest, all of their parents are alive. So they can be there for me, but it's not in the same way as someone who has experienced that loss or anything remotely close to it. And like I have found that in sharing stuff online, where if you go and scroll through the video, especially the one that went viral of me opening my last gift from my dad, like the comments are filled with people sharing moments of their lost loved ones and remembering them, and they're very beautiful. There's like some shitty comments of people making weird comments about crying, and that has more to do with how they feel internally and their own discomfort with feeling grief than it has anything to do with me. And like that is beautiful to look at comment sections like that where it's like people are sharing their struggles, and it's the same thing with sharing trauma and talking about like neurodivergency or like experiences with like mental health struggles. It connects you with other people who have felt the same way and feel alone, and like even people who don't necessarily feel alone but are ready to share and connect with other people who might feel alone. And like sharing neurodivergency is what helped me get my diagnosis. I wouldn't have known that I had ADHD if it wasn't for other people talking about the traits behind it and that leading me to looking further into it, because my understanding of ADHD until pretty recently, like the last like 7 years, was that it was just like a, oh my god, a squirrel, and like hyperactivity, not like, and like I mean I do get easily distracted, but it's like the very hyper stereotypical cartoonish way that like ADHD is portrayed, and usually it's only shown in men. So that's the other thing too, is it's like it manifests differently in women because women are more expected to mask. And like I masked very effectively. I did well in school and I could deal with it, but it's like the level of fucking mental labor it took to do that was insane. Like I was exhausted all the time. I thought I had chronic fatigue syndrome, and I would be so anxious at times during social interactions that I would sweat through my clothes from the armpits because I was just so chronically anxious. And then I was embarrassed about that too, and it's like I felt super insecure. So it's like these things that I like dealt with alone didn't have to be dealt with alone if people had shared more. And also like back then the internet wasn't what it is today, so that also plays a role. But it's like now, yeah, literally me in high school, I remember I sweat through one of my like hoodies in high school, and like a guy pointed it out at Subway and laughed at me, and like I was like, damn. And then I stopped wearing light colors because I was like, I can't rein in my anxiety. So and yeah, like getting the neurodivergency diagnosis is huge. And yeah, driving is good processing time with music and podcasts, and it's a beautiful drive. It's going to be great. Like it's going to be less fun than what it would be if I wasn't hauling horses, because that always stresses me out. But on the bright side, I get to practice that drive with a trailer with furniture loaded, so it'll still be heavier. I get to do that like the week or the week and a half before I'm actually leaving. So I'll have already done the drive fully loaded with the trailer, which will be good. And like, I mean, it's not that I don't have any practice driving through the mountains with a trailer. Like when I went to get my Mustangs, I drove through the mountains of Oregon, California, and Nevada. However, what I will say from that drive, comparing to the drives that I've done to go to where I'm moving to, the Canadian highways and mountain passes are more extreme. So I am taking a different route than what I would typically take without a trailer, because the one that I usually take is like this the whole way. You're just like winding S-shaped curves. And with a trailer, it would like add so much time because you have to slow down for all the switchbacks. So I'm technically adding an hour to take a straighter route, but I think that it'll actually add less time than what it would to take the windy route. And like I've done this drive so many times, it's like the difference between 9 and 10 hours is like nothing. The biggest thing is that I'm going at night because I don't want to be like driving the horses in the heat of the day, and I need to beat my other horses there. So I have to leave and do the drive straight through with my Mustangs and get there first, and then be ready to unload the boys when they arrive. And yeah, so like I have it all planned. It's gonna be stressful. The cats are probably gonna be stressed in the car, and that's gonna stress me out. I'm hoping they don't meow the entire fucking time. Otherwise, I'm gonna need to put like earbuds on or something, and it'll stress me out. Like it really will make me nervous. I'm not worried about Phoebe at all because she's like the road trip queen. She's come with me and done so many long drives that like that's a non-issue. She's great in the car, so it's literally just the horses and then the cats, and then it's like once we're all there, it's going to be a big sigh of relief. And then the other thing that's going to kind of be interesting coming up is like filling the trailer with my furniture, because I'm going to try to do all of my furniture in one trailer load, and like whatever I can't fit, I basically just don't get to keep. Like other than like, because it's like once the horses are in the trailer for the second trip, I'll have my trailer tack room to put stuff in and the back of my truck, like the bed, but that's it. So it's like if it's not something that can fit in that situation, like it can't come with me. So it's going to be a very uncomfortable 11 days between taking all my furniture and then like driving it, like, and then like waiting until I'm actually leaving. I'm probably gonna end up sleeping on like a couch or something, or like an air mattress, or just like my mattress on the floor, like a frat boy. And then like the other thing too that I have to figure out is just like, yeah, getting all my furniture there, what to pack, and fitting it all in the trailer. And then my cat's stuff has been stressing me out because I don't want to remove all their enrichment. So I have to like, this is the other thing. This is why all of my stuff has to fit in the trailer load. Because like my cat's cat trees have to come with me on the day that they are leaving, because I don't want them to just not have any hides when I leave. So like that is gonna be something where it's like their stuff is gonna take up more space. So like basically I'm gonna have no furniture, and then I'm also having a going away party, and like my mom fucking pointed out to me, she's like, what are people sitting on? Like what chairs are people, if you're taking all of your furniture before, like where are people gonna sit? And I was like, shit, that's a good point. Well, I was like, well, I guess everyone's gonna need to bring a fucking chair, because I'm not gonna have enough furniture here. There might be a couple of chairs, but it's like they're gonna need to bring a chair, and I guess I have to leave a camping chair here for me, and I can't just take all my camping stuff with me. So like I have my going away party 2 days before I leave, and I was like, shit, I'm not gonna have any fucking furniture. So that'll be fun. I might just like end up seeing if I can borrow tables or chairs from people that have stuff and call it a day, but like whatever. I just want to see everyone before I go. So yeah, that's basically the gist of it. And then it's gonna be a big hauling ass, like just going. But yeah, like driving through the night, I don't prefer driving through the night for Frederick. I agree with you there, but like it's the only way to avoid the heat with that length of drive. And to arrive in time. Like even if I left at 3 a.m., like I wouldn't get there, like even without adding any time with the trailer, which is very unlikely, I wouldn't get there till 1 p.m. So I'd be getting there in the middle of the afternoon at the peak of the sun. So my plan, like, because I was like initially planning on leaving at 3 or 4 a.m. on the morning of the 25th. But then I was like, I'm going to be so stressed that like I'm not going to be able to sleep anyways, so I might as well leave the evening before, and drive through the night when there's no one on the road. And yeah, there's going to be more wildlife to watch out for, but like I trust wildlife more than I trust how people drive, because I find that they are more predictable if you know what to watch for them and like you go slow and you pay attention to wildlife corridors. And then there's no one to tailgate me and stuff. And then I'll arrive like mid morning or early afternoon the next day, and the horses don't have to be in the heat at all. Because they are doing the drive straight through. Like the Mustangs will not be getting unloaded. And like people might have an issue with that. Their ride to get to Canada was 14 hours. And then plus the time at the border to get across. So it was probably more like 15 or 16 hours in the trailer. And like they obviously could not be unloaded because they're wild. And they had hay the whole time. They didn't eat it because they were nervous. And then like I offered them water, but it's like we couldn't unload them because they're completely wild. And like unless you can unload somewhere that has a full chute system that is Mustang height, you can't get them back in the trailer. So we had to do it straight through. So this drive will be shorter. And I honestly think it'll stress them out less if I don't unload them, because unloading them at an unfamiliar place and then asking them to get back on the trailer again after a long journey is a big ask. So I'd rather just do it straight through, because like realistically, like even if I did a layover, I wouldn't drive less than like 6 hours before laying over. And then at that point you only have 4 hours left. So might as well go straight through. But yeah, it's very long. And like the other thing is just like the drivers on the highway, and like if I drive that late, there's also going to be less truckers on the highway because it's a trucking route. And yeah, so there's a bunch of different stuff where it's like I've changed the time that I'm leaving, where I'm going to go the night before, because there's just no point. Like I'm not going to get sleep before anyways. And it's safer for me to be fresher than what I would be if I like tried to leave at 3 or 4 a.m. And then I'm just going to unload them when we get there. And ideally my plan is to, like, when I drop my furniture off, I'm going to go get a round bale of hay and I'm going to put it in their fields. They already have hay ready, so I don't have to fill nets before they get there. And then I'm going to get their water troughs there, and hopefully ask my landlord to fill it like the day of or the day before they're there, so that they have water to drink from like right when they get off. But they're probably not going to drink right away because they're going to be running around and checking out their place and stretching their legs, but they'll drink after. But then everything's like set up where they don't have to have any waiting period to like have access to things. And then obviously they'll have hay the whole time. And I'll also offer them water, which I think this time around they're probably more likely to drink, because they're not going to be afraid of me when I come into the trailer. So I can just go in through the escape door and like offer them water. And if they want water, then they can drink it at that point. But there is a good chance they might be too nervous to drink. So we'll see. It'll be interesting seeing the difference in their hay consumption and stuff this time versus the last time they had a long drive. Because like they just didn't eat anything last time they were in the trailer. I don't fucking blame them, because it would have been traumatic and scary to get chute loaded into a trailer and then travel that long. So yeah, that's the plan. But anyways, I appreciate everyone for tuning in on this live, and now you know a little bit more of the plans. And stay tuned, because there's going to be a lot more to share in the coming weeks as I continue packing, because like I'm slowly but surely getting rid of like all the stuff I need, and then it's like now, and then I have to clean my whole place and do all these other things, and it's just like, oh my god. But anyways, thank you for listening, and I hope you all have a good night, and I appreciate all of your support and love and kindness. And this was a really nice group of people and a nice discussion. And I am looking forward to being able to do more of these, and also eventually introducing you to my landlord, because I think that we'd have the fucking greatest time running lives like this. And I'm going to tell her that. But yeah, thank you so much, everybody, and bye-bye.